Alida, will you call roll?
That's correct. Thanks. Good evening. Susan Reeves.
Present.
Ken McCroskey.
Present.
Peggy McQuaid.
Present.
Farid Javandel.
Present.
John Mickey might be late or might be excused because he was on a plane as of this afternoon.
Thank you. And then we have the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any comments on minutes?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain, since I wasn't here. That takes us to our public comment period. This is a period for comments on things that are not otherwise on the agenda. There will be a public comment during each agenda item. So if you have items that you'd like to bring to our attention that are not on our agenda tonight, this is the time. Seeing none, I'm going to ask the commission if you have comments that are not on the agenda. Great. Move right along to the police report. And welcome Lieutenant Geisberger.
Great, thank you, good evening. So our statistics for September, we had a total of 17 collisions, 11 non-injury collisions, 6 injury collisions, 5 hit and runs, 4 collisions on Marin, 1 near a school, and 1 auto pedestrian collision. We issued approximately 105 moving citations, and of notable tomorrow, we're doing a traffic enforcement program. We're going to have additional officers on the street targeting stop signs, speeding, red lights, and seat belts. Their time is being funded through an OTS grant that we were awarded. It was a total of a $49,160 grant towards that type of enforcement. So this is one of our operations that will be happening tomorrow.
Great.
Great.
Any questions for the lieutenant? We have a question for the public for the lieutenant.
Where were the hit and runs?
So the question was, just for the audience at home, where were the hit and runs?
You know what? I don't know where all of them were.
Okay.
I would follow up with that and say, were those hit and run parked cars or with other people involved, or is that also?
You know, from my recollection, I know one was a rear-end collision. Somebody was struck from behind, and then I think a couple were parked vehicles. And I think there was a total of 5. I can't remember the others. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
We have another question from the.
Do you also do, during that enforcement phase, do you do crosswalk violations?
That's not one of the specifics that's laid out in the enforcement plan.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. Have a good evening.
So we'll move right along into item number 6 on our agenda. And our first item is number A, Complete Streets, the conceptual design and plan for San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give the staff report this evening. This is a project that by now the Commission has become familiar with. It began in early 2012 when the city received a grant in conjunction with the Local Government Commission, which is a Sacramento-based nonprofit. It's a grant from Caltrans to develop concept plans for what are called complete streets, which are streets that serve all modes of transportation, vehicles, transit, bicycles, pedestrians, and so forth. Beginning in December of 2012, there was an extensive effort to engage the public. We had a week-long design, charrette, and community outreach effort. Thank you. That culminated in a series of meetings with the public over at Ocean View School. Based on those workshops and community meetings, 3 concepts were developed for improving the complete street features of San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street. The 3 concepts then have been brought to you over a series of meetings during this year, and also to the City Council at one point to give them an update on the progress. We're now reaching the kind of the final stage of the process, which is to have you review the draft final report. We're looking for your comments this evening and then hoping that we would be able to present it to the city council for their acceptance. I'd like to touch base briefly before getting into the details on how the report's intended to be used. It's not intended to be a final decision on every concept or plan or project that's in here. It really will serve as the foundation for a series of things that we're working on. One of the major initiatives that the city's working on right now is an update to our general plan, the first general plan update in almost 20 years. So at the completion of this report, I think you can expect to see that the major themes and policies and projects in this report get into the draft of the general plan. You'll again get another shot at that during 2014. And then that would, at that point, if approved by the city council, would become formal city policy. We'll also be using this as the basis for applying for grants to fund the design and then ultimately the construction of individual projects. As the commission knows, most of the improvements that you see us doing in roadways in town, with the exception of maybe some of the smaller speed humps or repaving projects, but the big ones, like the one across the street, around projects that we've done around Marin School and so forth, those are grant funded. And they basically get funded by ALETA doing the groundwork and applying for the grants. And then we cobble together different funding sources to build these things. To have a report like this helps us prepare a strong grant application. We'll also be using this as we work with individual property owners particularly along San Pablo Avenue, as a foundation for discussions as they think about redeveloping their properties. UC Village is the most immediate example of that, but every year or two we get projects that come along San Pablo Avenue, and to be able to have a blueprint that we can use to help property owners develop their properties, it's very useful. The report is quite extensive. I'm not going to try to summarize every issue in it or every project or every policy, but I think I'd like to do in my remaining time for the staff report is just highlight a couple of things that will be perhaps of discussion this evening. First, to begin with San Pablo Avenue, this is a busy street. Buchanan actually carries more traffic, but it's maybe one of the kind of the spine of the city in many respects. 25,000 cars and vehicles it's the 85th percentile, going at about 40 miles an hour. Right now, there are not bicycle facilities on San Pablo Avenue. As a result of that, bicyclists are either traveling in the vehicle lane or on sidewalks. It is a major transit corridor, and right now our bus stops in some cases are not ideally located, and in nearly all cases are not particularly welcoming to transit users. There are also, for people, pedestrians, bicyclists who are trying to go east-west from particularly kids going to school, there are not good pedestrian crossings for many long segments of San Pablo Avenue. So complete street studies are ideally suited for initiatives like this. We want to try to improve all those elements so that it is a safer street and also hopefully more attractive. One of the big issues that has come up in some of your recent discussions is the question of the San Pablo Avenue bus stop at Solano. This is a bus stop that from a transit perspective is not well located. It's on the near side of the intersection as buses are going northbound. And normally for the smooth function of the transit service and the smooth function of the intersection for vehicles, you want to have it on the far side so that when the bus stops at the bus stop, it doesn't end up getting hung up through a traffic cycle. And it also prevents a situation where pedestrians who are getting on or off the bus are crossing in front of the buses, which is a hazard to everyone, and again slows down the traffic on the street for everyone. When we started this process, I think we were insensitive to the importance of a green loading zone parking space on the north side of the intersection. And I'm talking near the Max's Liquor location. So we've had a lot of community dialogue here at commission meetings. We've also, Aleda and I met with some of the business owners in a more informal setting a month or two ago to talk through these issues. I'm sure you'll hear some more about that this evening as we kind of think about giving you alternatives to think about. If this is an issue that you're struggling with, You don't have to make a final decision tonight. We can explore the possibility of phasing some of the improvements. Aside from the bus stop itself, bus stop location, there are other things we can do there. The signal timing is, we believe, inefficient for the way it's being used, the intersection is being used these days. And we can do these things one step at a time and see how they improve the situation. And then we'd be just opportunistic in changing the layout of the physical layout. And sometimes over the passage of time, and this is a report that we'll probably be using for 10 or 15 years, properties get redeveloped or turnover in businesses, and there may be a better time than now to pursue this. So that's just something for you to consider. Another issue that has come up frequently in the discussion of complete streets is the development of a concept that was originally in the active transportation plan, which was to create some kind of lower speed, more comfortable bike routes on Keynes and Adams, so that bicyclists going north and south don't have to be on San Pablo Avenue, which under any circumstance for almost any bicyclist is kind of uncomfortable. You've received a presentation about that at your last meeting from our colleagues in Berkeley, who did a nice job in kind of describing some of the complexities of that. And we think that's something that's worthy of continued consideration to try to create that network. But again, it's complicated. There's not an obvious, easy solution that addresses everybody's concerns on that. And then finally, on Buchanan Street, it is a higher volume street than San Pablo, interestingly enough. A lot of people find that surprising. The vehicle speeds are a little bit slower. We've just now completing a major infrastructure improvement to Buchanan, which will improve safety for bicyclists and pedestrians considerably. But there's still pretty significant segments of roadway where we don't have good, safe crossings for pedestrians. Particularly, again, our emphasis is on safety for kids going to school. So while we have now 2 new signals on Buchanan that we didn't have a couple of years ago, another pedestrian crossing would be a worthwhile investment ultimately. I think at this point I'll pause if there are any specific questions or if anything you want to bring up on the screen, we're happy to do that, and Elaine and I will try to answer your questions.
I have a bunch of questions.
Please.
There's always somebody, I guess. My first question is, I've been noting in the press about El Cerrito is starting or involved in a complete streets project with bicycle lanes or whatever. Does that impact this at all? Or do we want to somehow coordinate so that it comes together cohesively, or are they so far behind it doesn't matter, or how does that all work?
Well, we absolutely want to coordinate, and the community development, there's a new community development director in El Cerrito, and she and I are pledged to one another to get together every once in a while to make sure that we don't do things where our investments don't connect. And generally speaking, the last few years we've had some smaller projects that have done a good job at that. They have the advantage of a few more feet of width than we do in the street, and so they can do things with bicycle lanes a little bit better than we can, or with transit stops. But yeah, we do want to, if they have say a class 2 bicycle lane where it's separated, it's not sharing the lane but separated from the vehicle lane, ideally if we have the room we want to do the same thing, so it's as seamless as possible. But I think the conclusion the commission has reached, ultimately kind of looking at our whole mile of roadway, is we don't have the luxury of doing that all the way through. We kind of have to pick and choose where we have dedicated bike lanes and where we have to share the lane.
And another question that I had was, we got a letter last month from the fire department with lots of concerns and issues. Have they been addressed? Or I guess when I look at the 134-page document, I'm not sure how to figure out what's changing or what's new, or that was confusing to me. I'm not sure how to do that, and maybe you could direct.
I'm going to answer the question. The comments are all addressed and also included in the appendix in this document. They also, the comments from the the fire department actually had to do with the nose of the median encroaching into the intersection. But that is something that is a design issue that when we have the funds to actually build the project or build certain intersections, we want to be careful not encroaching into the intersection.
Okay.
So this is just a concept level and not engineering plans.
And I guess my last question kind of relates to the UC project, and it seems like there's two different plans. There's the plan that Complete Streets has, and there's the plan that the university has. How do they get integrated? So we end up with not
Right.
this, but together.
That's exactly what we're working on now, and I think when we get to the UC project agenda item, I've got a graphic that I can show you. I think we're at the point that UC project where it's kind of taking because it's going to be implemented so quickly. I think we should probably focus the complete street discussion of that segment of the roadway when we talk about that project, if that's clear. And we're certainly using this as the framework, as I mentioned, but just based on some meetings we've had in the last couple of days, which we'll tell you about, there's just not enough room to do everything that needs to happen for that project and everything that's being shown in this draft report. The Michael Mole has been involved in the discussions we've had over the last few days, so we're coordinating that, and we may end up with some revisions to this report so that they're consistent, or at least a comment or something to clarify all that.
Okay, thank you.
So, it's not specifically called out in here, but I'm using the new bike and pedestrian path along Buchanan. And I realized that it's more important, and I know it's mentioned in here, to have the hot crossing at, what is this again?
Taylor?
Taylor.
Right? Because there isn't any sidewalk. I didn't realize that. I wasn't part of that. So when you cross at Pierce, there's no sidewalk. It's only a bike. It's only bike lanes there.
Right.
I know that because my bike was stolen and I'm having to walk to work now on that path. And so I think it's more important. There's a lot more reason that I didn't realize to have the other crossing, because if you cross it at where we have the plan for the hot crossing, then that goes right into a sidewalk. So
But
we're
also,
brilliant, I think.
so pedestrians are supposed to actually share the bikeway
Okay.
at Pierce, so it's okay for pedestrians to be there. Maybe it's not clear. Maybe we should really have a sign saying share path.
I didn't realize I was walking in the bike lane, and all of a sudden I realized, like 2 days into it, I'm like, I'm walking in the bike lane, and then I realized there was no marking, so maybe it wasn't a bike lane.
Should I-
But maybe we need some clarification, because I wasn't clear. So my other question, your staff is seeking our approval based on the Complete Streets as it is right now, to submit that to City Council for their review as a kind of a blueprint, and from what I understand, how we would submit projects for funding, things like that. Okay. So basically, you're seeking from us an approval to send this up to City Council in what time frame?
Recommendation, we're thinking we're going in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
First meeting in December.
Okay.
We have timeframes for the grant from Caltrans. They give us the money with a timeframe that we're supposed to get it completed by, and we're a little bit over schedule. Not seriously over, but kind of normally over schedule. But we'd like to wrap it up sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Okay. I guess that's it for questions from the commission. At this point, we'd like to open it up for public comment. And we do ask that you fill out the little comment cards so we can get your name right. And if you can hand those in over here, that'd be great. I think there are a number of people who want to comment, so you might form a line over here. you want to start it off?
My name is James Silva. I own Avalon Glassworks. I think you remember me from a couple of months ago. I am deeply concerned about the approval of this plan as a blueprint for going forward. 3 points I want to make. As I read through the plan, I was struck, section 3-27, about parking demand. Figure 3-21 shows peak hour occupancy for the study area, which occurred at 5 p.m. based on a one-day survey conducted on Tuesday, February 26th. As far as I could tell, all of the information, all of the recommendations, all of the conclusions about parking, about what parking can be eliminated, what parking can be moved, is based on a single Tuesday in February observation. That is absolutely insignificant in terms of data for analyzing the parking of the district. It says that the block that my shop is on is only occupied 55% of the time. Try a Saturday. It is full 100% of the time, all day long. Try a Friday. Using a single day like this and then basing conclusions and recommendations about removing parking is irresponsible at best, and the fraudulent manipulation of data to advance an agenda at worst. You cannot approve these kinds of recommendations on parking based on a single Tuesday in February. Second point. I'm sure you folks are all familiar with the new law that was passed in September, signed by the governor, about bike lanes and the clearance, 36 inches of clearance required for a car to pass a bike. I don't see how you can approve a plan, a design plan, that I don't think takes into account the new current law about the clearance for bikes and cars in terms of passing. I'm guessing you don't have 36 inches for clearance to pass. Your Mountain View just rejected a very similar plan to put bike lanes on El Camino Real. The council people, I don't know how you make El Camino Real safe enough to make it a real bike corridor. Cars go 40 to 50 miles an hour on El Camino, and there's so little room that for bikes that drivers could easily violate the new law requiring drivers to stay 3 feet away from cyclists. Mountain View rejected a very similar plan because they don't know the impact of the law that was just passed last month. I don't see how you can responsibly pass a plan that was created 9 months ago and over the course of this time without taking that into account. Lastly, quickly, when I was here 2 months ago, you folks said that the default was not to move the bus stop, that if we couldn't address the concerns of the business community, you wouldn't actually move the bus, you'd leave it there. So the recommendation tonight is your chance to show that you have the courage to say, no, this is not a good plan, and you have the integrity to say, we're not going any further until this is fixed. Please, don't approve this plan tonight.
I'm going to take these in roughly the order I got them. Chris Cole.
Good evening, Commissioners. I speak here for the owner of the property where Max's Liquors, Avalon Glass, and other businesses are located. You've heard all the arguments, and staff has presented them to you. I do agree with Mr. Silva that none of the problems of moving the bus stop have been resolved. None of them have. There will be no loading for the businesses. There'll be no offloading. There'll be no parking for the businesses. And yet staff is still recommending that the bus stop be moved. 1 minute is the savings for each bus that has to stop on the far side rather than the near side. 1 minute, and yet we're losing sight of the humanity and the personhood of the people who have these businesses. They will be out of business. Max's relies, they absolutely rely on short-term parking. Max's relies, Avalon Glass relies, the copy shop there relies on being able to get goods from suppliers. This will be gone if there is a bus stop there. We cannot lose sight of these people and their families and their livelihoods so that we can, so that Albany can implement some plan that is supposed to be very good for transportation. Well, it may be a little bit better for transportation, 1 minute better for transportation, but it is devastating for the people who work there. I was encouraged to hear tonight that this plan can go forward even without the change in the bus stop. That, and I try to quote here that there are other things that can be done to improve traffic situation. Maybe change in signal timing, maybe to phase in changes over time, maybe some type of opportunistic design, which I don't know what that is, but I'm not a planner, and that there may be a better time than now to do these things. So I would urge this commission, and I'm just talking about the bus stop, to not pass this plan with the bus stop change, to see if signal timing could be changed so that we maybe change this 1 minute to 30 seconds. I mean, this is an insignificant amount of time for any one person, and it means a lot to the people who are in business there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Kane?
Hi there, Alan Kane, Solano Avenue Association here representing the association. A couple questions. The 18 that would be coming down San Pablo, in theory, making a right up Solano, where would it stop?
We'll have to look for a location between Keynes and Solano.
So there's 4 parking spaces between Keynes and Solano where a bus stop could go.
You can use the bulb out there too. I mean, we'll have to see if the far side is the best location for that.
So we really don't know what we're talking about other than the 72 stop.
It depends on basically if the bus stop is removed or not.
Okay. So we've had a recent reassignment of parking spaces to become wheelchair accessible. We've lost 2 parking spaces to a development near Keynes and Solano. We've got a movie theater there and a gym. The one thing that Albany has that is so tangible throughout the area is its free parking. And it's slowly being chipped away from the district. And this proposal that we're talking about, we don't even know how many more parking spaces it's going to take up in a vicinity with a movie theater and a gym. So the other question that I had about the buses stopping at Solano and San Pablo from a safety perspective, I know that it's probably bad for the people who are walking across the street and the bus may block their view. But I don't understand the concept of AC Transit's, they're not able to meet their schedule. Maybe they can adjust their schedule so they don't have to rush their buses through town. I think if they stopped at Solano and San Pablo, paused, there's 2 crosswalks there, always full of kids. I think having a bus stop on this side of the 2 crosswalks is a perfectly reasonable thing. Having buses rush through an intersection at Solano and San Pablo so they can make a light, so they can hurry up to get to the other side of the street so they can save that minute. I'm not sure if that's safe. Respective of any of that, and with all due respect to people that are bicyclists and the whole 9 yards, we cannot afford to lose any more of our free parking. It's our #1 asset. We cannot see it chipped away.
I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sorry. Sangeeta Garsha?
Good evening. I'm Sangeeta Gurja, owner of Max's Liquors, and I have been here through all the meetings that you have previously, and I have always told you how important the parking that we have in front of our businesses. James and Ellen told you guys. In this economy, I know I'm talking about just, kind of being selfish about the parking that we have, but in this economy, we're already suffering. We're competing with big businesses and whatnot. And if we lose the parking that we have right now, there's no way my business is gonna, survive for too long. I can tell you that. I have lived in this city for past 23 years. I went to local schools. The business that we have had that in our family since 1989, and the business itself has been in the city since 1923. And anytime a new business opens up in the city, one of the requirements they have from the city is how much parking they will require for the business. And in our case, it seems like the businesses that are already there, they're well established. The city is taking away the parking from them to put some bus stop in front of them. We businesses bring revenue to the city. We pay you guys taxes. I don't see AC Transit paying you any taxes. And the city of Albany has always said that they stand by the local business. They promote local business, and I think it's about time that you guys show that, what you say, and that's all I'm asking for. For the past 8 months or so, ever since this issue about the bus stop has been going on, it has taken so much away from our personal lives. I have nightmares. Like, what are we gonna do? That the businesses that we have right now, those are the source of our income. My family relies on that, we rely on that. I'm not saying that you should be thinking like, the people you are appointed as. Think about a person, put yourself in my place and think about it. If somebody took your source of income away from you, how would you feel about that? I can cry right now. I have gone through so much. I'm depressed. I'm tired of this. And this has been going on for years now. My uncles had to fight this before. My parents had to fight this issue with the bus stop, and now we are fighting it. And this is taking a toll on us, physically, emotionally, in whatever way you can imagine. Thank you so much, and I hope that you guys would consider all the stuff that I have said to you. Thank you.
Winky Campbell Notar.
Thank you, members of the commission. Winky Campbell Notar with the Albany Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight to support our businesses, our member businesses, and all the small businesses in Albany who are part of what made this town very successful and a unique place to come and shop. Let me back up a minute. Pretty much all of the points have been made to you. There's a couple of things that I would just like to amplify, and one is that the AC bus route has a number of stops that it can smooth its schedule over, as Alan said. That its whole timeline does not depend on that one bus stop. The businesses are brick and mortar. They can't move. Where the bus stop is now located is on a blank wall, which is not near a main entrance of the business. And it says on page 2 of staff report, one of the goals of Complete Streets is to be supportive of the businesses in the study area. And this recommendation does not support our local businesses. So I'm urging the commission to move the plan forward with a couple of exceptions as it is now. One is to keep the bus stop. Secondly is to ask for a public safety report from the police station about the issues of loitering in front of a liquor store where there is a bus stop and all of that constant traffic back and forth. And thirdly is to give direction to staff to coordinate this Complete Streets plan with El Cerrito, which has just received a grant for a similar study. And I think the whole issue will be a lot smoother. We've got AC Transit will have another couple of miles in which to smooth out their route and look at ways. And we need to not stop at the city line, but continue the complete streets further into El Cerrito. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Pilch.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nick Pilch, Albany resident. I urge you to approve this plan as written. As far as taking a couple items, the Adams and Canes, I support some method of getting bicycle access on those streets such that bikes can go southbound on, wait, let me see if I got this right. Southbound on Canes and northbound on Adams, as they cannot do now. As far as the bus stop goes, I'm sensitive to business. I disagree with Mr. Alan Kane very strongly that free parking is one of Albany's assets. There are numerous studies that say free parking degrades a community, and I do not count that as one of our assets. I don't want anyone to lose parking, but I think there's ways that we can move the bus stop and have a green zone farther down, which would mitigate this problem, mitigate the change. I think this is a change that AC Transit wants to. It's a best practice that AC Transit wants to implement for the region. And as a town, we don't have the right to say that we are the only ones who are going to not comply with this. I think we have to do what's best for the city and what's best for the region. There's no data that moving the bus stop will hurt business. And the buses do not have to rush through the intersection because they have technology that can keep the light green as they approach, especially the rapid buses do. So I urge you to keep the bus stop moving in the plan, and this does not represent a project that has to be done by the city. It's simply a recommendation that we do this. Considering the opposition to it, it's likely never to get done, but I urge you to adopt it as a good direction, as a good best practice for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Vicus Garcia? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Garcia. Thank you.
Good evening, Vikas Garcia, the co-owner of Maxus Liquors. Again, the bus stop issue, talking about that. Everybody mentioned that how important it is for the business, and the Maxus Liquor, it's there from 1923. It's itself is a city landmark. A lot of people, they come there, and then tell us that, I used to come here, when I was a kid. So, another thing is that, moving the bus stop in front of the business is going to, destroy us totally. Because we get more than 50% of customers who, they come, they tell us that when we present this one, I showed it to you that we collect signing the petitions. I have another 350 more petitions. So I submitted 650 already. These are on the top of that. So I already have 1,000 customer signatures. They tell us that if I show it to them that if you want to support us doing this, if you read it, they tell us why is the city doing it? Because it's a convenience source for me. I just come to your business, stop for a minute, hop in and hop out, which is quick stop. If there's no parking, I won't be coming there. That's what they tell me. So that's totally going to destroy our business. And these are the originals. I'll submit a copy of these later to you guys. So, and everybody, all the people, they talk about this when I tell them that the city is planning to do move the bus stop in in there and say, everybody shocks and they say, why are they doing it? So that's their reaction, and then out of like 1,000 people signed it, nobody, even single person, has said that it's a good idea, do that. So I just urge you to not to do it, in front of business. Just keep it there where it is. Thank you.
Alan Eckert.
Hi, Alan Eckert, Albany resident. My first comment is, it seems like everybody's afraid to sit even closer because they're afraid of the Traffic and Safety Commission tonight, because everybody's 2 rows back. As soon as I walked in, I was kind of shocked by that. And I also want to comment that this is not like a definitive plan. This is a approval of a plan with a big asterisk. Like, we have time to discuss this stuff later on, but this is a large general plan for this process. And the goal is to get people walking and biking and going to these places instead of driving their cars, and having a safer community to do that kind of stuff. And it's not really safe to do so on San Pablo at this time. And to hyper-focus on a single issue within this plan, I think is kind of ridiculous at this point, until we actually get to the point where, rubber starts meeting the road with that part of it. The other thing too, I don't think people are reading this plan very closely, because there was a proposal for a green zone just beyond the bus stop. That was right after the bus stop, to get rid of one of those stops. So the green zone will still be there. Maybe they're going to burn an extra calorie. That's great for everybody, that they're going to have to walk 15 feet more to get to Max's Liquors and other stops around the area. Frankly, I would enjoy walking and biking, and every time I've gone to Max's, I've only walked there from my house, which is on the other side of the city. So I think that to hyper-focus on a single issue tonight is not our goal for the evening. But I do want to celebrate everybody that was part of this process to bring their ideas to the table and had multiple opportunities to have their say, and will continue to have their say, because this plan is going to be piecemeal. We're not going to start doing everything all at once. I have my priorities for the plan that I have, but that's not the time tonight to really think about the smaller parts of this plan. And the bus stop, yeah, it's kind of a big stuff for some people. It's a small part for other people. But really, let's talk about how Albany is going to change if we think of the larger goal of what's in mind here. And we can have a longer discussion about the bus stop, but we really need to start having shorter discussions about the crosswalks a block down on San Pablo, to make sure kids are getting to the school safely, to make sure people can ride their bikes safely from one end to the other and go all the way out to the bulb and the waterfront, and really get around to this town that we really enjoy to celebrate and love. So let's not hyper-focus on just one single issue just tonight. We have plenty of time to do that later. Thank you.
Thank you. Edwin Keynes.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Edwin Keynes. I resided in 808 Adam Street, Albany. I was the previous owner of the Max's Liquor. I worked there almost 8 years. And what my experience was, there was always problem of the parking. I always had customer complaint. So I'm here tonight to support the small business owner, because these people pay very high price for that business, and to moving that bus stop from the existing location will totally kill their business. So I'm here tonight to request the commission, please do not move the bus stand. So it looks great where it is at this time, and I like your plan, it looks great, but other than the bus stop, it will be perfectly fine. Thank you very much for your support. Thanks.
Thank you. Preston Jordan.
Good evening, Commission, staff. Thank you for your work on this report. It's been a long process with a lot of input, and I think it's a great outcome. And I would encourage you to recommend it on to the City Council as is. Speaking for Carbon Neutral Albany, focusing on the bus stop, Obviously, that is a difficult issue. As you heard, it's come up again and again and again over the decades, and there's a reason for that. All the other bus stops along San Pablo, particularly for the rapid bus, are on the far side of the intersection. And the reason for that is because that is safer for pedestrians, and it is operationally more efficient for AC Transit. The issue for AC Transit isn't necessarily staying on schedule. It's making the bus route operate more efficiently, faster, so more people will use it. And people tonight have said, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Well, AC Transit gave statistics that indicated the reason for this, very founded statistics, unlike the conjecture about what is going to happen in the business if that bus stop moves, which no data has been presented. The data that AC Transit presented indicates that for every day, workday, that bus stop is where it is, the passengers cumulatively lose 2 days of time, 16 hours of time, because of the delays there. So that has a significant impact on the riders on the bus. So this is not a no-consequence decision to leave where it is. And so Carbon Neutral Albany would really encourage you to move it. We've heard that the short-term parking has been recommended to be moved to the north. For some reason, that's not acceptable. That's not a sufficient solution. We've heard that the consultant has recommended adding parking on Solano. For some reason, that is not a sufficient solution. Why aren't those sufficient solutions? I would ask you to reality test the conjectures that are being put to you about what will happen to the business. The data that AC Transit provided indicates there's about 450 people that board and get off the bus at that stop. It's the busiest stop in Albany. It's hard for me to believe that those people having time at the bus stop would not patronize Max's Liquors. And for some reason, they say that's going to be a disaster for them. I've heard comment that in other communities, bus stops and liquor stores don't make good neighbors. I'm not quite sure why that is. I would ask, if those don't make good neighbors, then is it a good idea to have people who can pull up, hop out, go in, buy a drink, and come back out? Is it a good idea to be having essentially almost how they're describing in a drive-through liquor store? Is that a good neighbor? Maybe it's because those consequences are externalized when that driver goes away. And if there are problems associated with them making their purchase, it's happening somewhere else. It's not happening right in front of the business. So again, I would ask you to reality test the conjectures that you're hearing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Fields.
Good evening. I wanted to mention two other things and maybe not even talk about the bus stop, depending on time. I wanted to read a sentence from page 3-11 of this report. It's titled Other Design Elements. And it says, although there will be similar design strategies used, each corridor requires a design tailored to its unique function, referring to San Pablo and Buchanan. And it says San Pablo Avenue is a retail main street. And that's the phrase I want to emphasize. Because this issue kind of straddles both A and C on your agenda, where at UC Village, we want to have an assisted living facility, but instead of having the retail frontage as which originally proposed, we have a driveway with an in and out crossing the bike lane and the sidewalk into the assisted living facility. So I won't talk about that too much till we get there, but this retail main street concept, if you look at all the photographs in here, they're photographs from Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Palo Alto, Santa Barbara. They're all showing small shops on the complete street that we're talking about. And certainly we're not a retail main street now. We have lots of auto service places, which I have patronized. I mean, we're not trying to get rid of them, but we're really saying that's not the concept, is having lots of driveways where a lot of traffic goes through the sidewalk and what will be the future bike lanes or cycle route. The other comment I wanted to make, I think it was in this report that I just read, that traffic on Buchanan, which is posted at 25 miles an hour, averages, or 85%, whatever, 30 miles an hour. And traffic on San Pablo, which I presume is posted at 30, averages 40, or 85%, I think, was 40. And I may have said once before speaking to you, make San Pablo Avenue 25 miles an hour. That would make it safer for cyclists, and maybe we'd actually keep it to 30. Now, I know that's a big deal. It involves Caltrans and all this stuff, but something to think about. because I myself sometimes cycle on San Pablo Avenue, in the traffic. And then the last thing with the bus stop, I'm not so much taking a position on it, but this issue of making the buses more efficient, there's lots of things we can do to make the buses more efficient. And AC Transit could start with one, because the 72R, which I ride frequently, is supposed to be 12 minutes. But when 3 of them come in a row, and then the 72M comes right after that, and you've missed them, you and all the other people waiting at the bus stops are losing 20 minutes. So there's plenty of things AC Transit could do to be more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Rye?
Thank you for the members of commission. I admit I'm pretty new to this issue. I'm actually here on a separate one, but as a rollerblader, I just wanted to put in my 2 cents. I do appreciate the city's effort to make the streets a lot safer, so that is definitely a good thing to make it more accessible to pedestrians and non-drivers like me. And I do want to echo the comment of how when I walk or when I rollerblade, I do notice the businesses, and I do start inviting friends to meet for things like coffee on the corner cafe. So the fact is, I love that Albany is walkable, Albany is accessible. I wish more could be done about some very dangerous parts of the sidewalks that my 6-year-old regularly, does a face plant with her scooter. So, that's basically my 2 cents. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. I think that's it for comments from the public on this issue. So I'd like to bring it back to the commission. Are there any general comments?
I have a question again.
Yeah, please.
Can you, Jeff, summarize your conversation with the business owners, and was there any sort of compromise that was coming up, or how did that go is basically what I want to know.
Well, it was a really good conversation. First of all, they were very welcoming, and treats and things like that. So that part of it was really productive and useful. I think we heard many of the same things you've heard this evening or at your other meetings. The one thing that didn't come up today that we talked about and that they explained that from their perspective, moving the green zone up would dislocate other 90-minute spaces. And so while I think if they were to probably, I'm speaking for them here, maybe they shut them down, but the green zone is perhaps the most important, but it's not the only thing that's important to them. And the 90-minute zone, the regular street parking is also important to them as well. But mostly the discussion, I think, was just kind of give and take, questions and answers. We didn't really make a formal presentation, anything of that nature. It was just kind of dialogue.
I'll chime in. I think that most of the plan seems to have pretty broad support. We've kind of gone over that, so I'm comfortable with it. The point of contention clearly remains the bus stop relocation. I think the comment that even if it's included within this plan, that's no guarantee it'll ever happen, is accurate. Anything that's purely concept needs to be fleshed out, and things can either be improved or fall apart in the details of implementation. To some extent, I kind of feel like this is deja vu. We had the same issue with the southbound bus stop. And for what it's worth, Subway Sandwiches is still there. One of the things that we did do there was, add some parking capacity on Solana that hadn't been there before. So one of those things that can be worked out when we get to the details, if and when we proceed with that, is that there could be potential net gain of parking. It depends how many spaces we can get on San Pablo there, or on Solano around the corner. Because even if the green zone on San Pablo shifts and you put a green zone right at the corner on Solano, that may make up for the bus stop. Again, I think we're far too early to say one way or the other whether it's feasible, workable. The details have to be figured out. But what I do feel is that whatever decision we make, the facts should be accurate. And not to dispute things that people brought up because they're very good concerns, but with regards to the 3-foot passing clearance law for bikes, that's regardless whether there's a bike lane or not. So adding a bike lane just makes it easier to have 3 feet. The typical traffic lane is 12 feet wide, the typical car is 6 feet wide. There's a lot of space to be shared out. If you've got the bike lane, that just means the cars are pushed farther over away from the bikes. So while I share that concern, I think bike lanes are always going to improve the clearance space. The comment was made by another speaker that the 1 minute savings is multiplied by the thousands of riders, 16 hours a day of cumulative lost time, is not trivial. The concerns of the businesses are not trivial, but I don't think either side should trivialize the other side's concerns. And if I were so inclined to trivialize one or the other, the decision would be really easy for me on this, and I'd say just do it now or erase it forever. I'm not suggesting we do that. Smoothing out the AC transit delay, miles of bus line to make those optimizations also equates to miles of bus line for more delay to accumulate. Again, you're multiplying by a lot of riders. The bus gets delayed. It's cars behind it getting delayed. It's people getting delayed. A lot of time impact there. So it's not trivial. And the comment about the buses bunching up is interesting because the buses bunching is the result of delays. It's not the cause of the delays. And that's one of the reasons AC Transit's trying to optimize their bus operations so they don't have that sort of thing happen. Because it's not just the current riders, but it's the riders, potential riders, who won't take the bus because the schedule's too unreliable and they're going to get delayed. And as I described, it can be, pretty random when the bus shows up. I personally never go to take the bus unless I'm checking the next bus website to know when that bus is coming, because the schedule to me is meaningless. It's the real-time arrival data is the only thing that I ever rely on. If the buses came more frequently, I wouldn't even bother with that. I'm just saying all that stuff to sort of balance the record, and yet I still think that if we keep this in the plan, which I think we should as a concept, it's going to have to be worked out in a way that absolutely minimizes the perceived impact. Because we've seen in other places where it's turned out not to be an impact. A lot of the studies that have been done show that increased bus ridership, increased bike presence translates to more retail success. So I'm bearing that in mind, and again, this is not something that if we pass it on to council now is going to happen overnight in any case. But I think it's something that bears consideration. We shouldn't just cross it off now. Otherwise, I like the plan.
I too like the plan. I think we've all worked on the various details of this plan. I'm proud of it. I think it addresses a lot of concerns I have as an Albany resident, primarily a pedestrian Albany resident, sometimes bike rider. I think the one focused issue is important to a lot of people. However, I think it's kind of overshadowing the overall importance of this plan and the amount of work that so many people have put into this across Albany. I very much appreciate you clarifying, and getting some accurate information and balance to it. I think it's really important for us to go into this in a balanced way. I'm proud of the plan. I think we need it, and we need to use it going forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the overall concept is right. And obviously, we're not doing the details tonight. And I think, we're gonna need to take a little bit more time on this bus issue. And really think about all of the ways that it can work for everybody. And that's not to trivialize your concerns, but there's gotta be a way that it can work out for everybody. And I think there is, I just think we haven't quite gotten to it yet. And I think just keeping the dialogue open is really important. And, but I think the concept of the whole plan is good. And as we go through it and we start working on the real details, then we'll have to make some adjustments as we go. But I think we need to move this forward.
I too think that the overall plan has been pretty well thought through on a conceptual level, but we're just at the conceptual level. And we'll be revisiting each one of the issues in the plan as we go through. And that's the time when we need to get really down to brass tacks.
Just to kind of add in something that, we've received, a few different traffic calming requests from neighborhoods on Albany Hill. And, the comments that I've heard from them have been along the lines of traffic on San Pablo is so bad that traffic keeps cutting through the hillside neighborhood. And this is one more piece of that. We certainly need to figure out how to retime the signal at Solano and San Pablo so it causes less delay. But part of that, again, is every time that bus is stopped at that corner, if it's actually managed to pull over all the way to the curb, it's only screwing up the right turns. If it's sticking out, it's even worse. At times you're losing half the traffic capacity there. So that 1 minute of delay is not just the bus riders. It may be some of the traffic experiencing it too. So again, not to say that by any means is a done deal, but the point is it is a big issue, and there's a lot at stake. And the rest of it, I love the prospect of the Hawk signal on Buchanan, all the things that we're doing, trying to get the bike lanes and the shadows, and every piece of that is a step in a positive direction. And there's a lot of challenges, but it's stuff that we have to undertake, and a lot of it will get ironed out as we go to detailed design when individual pieces move ahead. So with that, I'd like to move that we approve sending this plan to council.
I'll second that.
We have a movement and a second. Is there any further discussion?
So just to clarify the motion, you're making a recommendation that the council approve the plan.
Yes. We send it to council with our recommendation for approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Sorry, I didn't catch you made the second.
I did.
All right. Thank you, everybody who spoke this evening. I'd like to move on to item B, 6B, the request for installation of 2 disabled parking stalls at 956 Castro Street.
Yes, good evening. The city received a petition to install two parking stalls along in front of 956 Castro Street. The two residents there are disabled. They presented with the disabled placards and documentation, make them eligible for this request. In your package, I provided a flyer that I distributed through the different, the block of the 900 block of Castro Street and also half of the block of Madison Street on both sides. So it seems that is, in my observations about parking occupancy during the day.
Ed, could you shut the door? Oh, somebody's got it. Thank you, Winky.
In the day, there seems to be about maybe On Castro, 900 block of Castro, about 50% occupancy. I imagine that this is a little bit more, there's more demand in the evening and on weekends, and it's more difficult to find parking. On Madison, the block, even midday, seemed pretty busy, almost all of the spaces taken near that intersection. There was more parking available by the intersection with Solano Avenue. So with that, I'm gonna let Mr. Ritzima basically talk about.
Marin, my name is
Marin, I'm
John
sorry.
Marin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, we've lived in that house for 37 years and haven't had much of a problem until recently when we had to get handicap plates. And then the general plan for Albany makes the point that there have sent in the last 10 years almost 2,100 new residents have come and moved in with their cars, but maybe half of them have cars. And so we're having a difficult time now because I'm under the doctor's care, and we normally park in front of our gate right there. So, and we each trade cars, my wife and I. So we're asking for 2 places to be put in that we normally park in all the time anyway. We're not taking anything away from parking availability on that street. We just want them dedicated for us so that when we come back from whatever the spaces are open for us. And additionally, I noticed this because it's a Traffic and Safety Commission responsibility. I would suspect that there also needs to be some red curb put in at the walkway, the corner that Castro turns onto Madison South. People will park right up against the curb, and it's dangerous. It's a blind corner. It's very difficult. There's a bunch of trucks, big trucks that the contractors have. They live there, and they park on Madison right at the bottom, and they crowd that corner. So it's very difficult to see down the street when they're making a turn. So I would suggest that those 2 sides of the handicap ramp that's built into the curb be marked red to preclude people from crowding that corner. And also I'd like to have a red corner on my driveway because they come down, they turn down from Jackson onto Castro, and then they park and they crowd my driveway, and I can't get in. But I need a red curb there too. So there's 4 spaces that we're talking about. The upper 2, upper high, or closer to Jackson, closer to my driveway, are the 2 that we're talking about. Still leaves 2 places, 2 parking lot spaces. But they need to be marked as parking spaces because this picture that you took shows a big truck. That truck normally, a lot of times, will park in the middle of those 2 spaces. Takes them both up. So they need to be marked as parking spaces. That's all I have to say.
Well, yeah, what I tried to also portray in that flyer is the available parking space in front of your house. And I received one comment that I received is that it was a little bit confusing. People thought that it was 51 feet or 75 feet of blue curb that we were requesting. It's basically just the available parking, or the available curb space that is there.
Sorry, is that a question?
No. I'm just clarification only of the comments that we received. Also, this afternoon, and I forwarded the comment from Commissioner Mickey about this particular issue. I don't know if you had time to read them. I think maybe it was a little bit late just before the meeting, but I forwarded, and what he recommended is to see if your driveway is being used. So you use your driveway too. So basically his comment was if we can actually make use of the driveway space and make it, if it's not used, make it as
Yes, it is used.
It's used. So that's basically a question that he had.
Yes, it's used all the time. And many times I do have to park in front of my driveway.
One question that I asked you over the phone also was if you wanted to have one parking space on Madison and the other one
No.
on Castro?
No, because I have difficulty walking up the hill anyway.
Oh, I
And
see.
so I get out of my car, go in the gate, and we've done that for 37 years now.
So your driveway is basically on Castro?
It's on
is that-
Castro. It's right above, I submitted a bunch of pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I saw another driveway type of on Madison too, but it's not, there's no curb cut or anything, but I mean,
No.
it's okay.
No, it used to be 60 years ago, but
Okay,
not
thanks.
anymore. It's been converted. So.
I think you have 2 comments to people who wanted to speak there.
Are there any questions from the commission?
Well, I'm sorry, I have a question because I'm not quite understanding. From the photo, I thought that the garage was on Madison. Was it ever on Madison?
Yeah, it was.
Okay,
Years ago.
okay, that's what
But
I was
it's-
confused about.
It's,
And,
it's a curb now. There's a curb there. There's no driveway.
okay,
And those doors go into another room.
okay, that's where I was a little bit
Rec room, they
confused.
used to call it.
So now your garage is on the
Castro,
uphill side of your house?
halfway up between Castro and Jackson.
So it looks like it's big enough to hold 2 cars, is that right?
Well, it's a hobby shop. And so, like most hobby shops, it's filled up with stuff.
So you don't park in it?
I park, I work on my car and fix it there, and then
Oh, okay.
that's all. But it's full of stuff, tools. I used to be a mechanic. I enjoy it and was working on cars, and I still do as much as I can. So I need access to that garage, but we park on the 2 cars on the street right there.
And you can't put one car in the driveway?
There's already, well, I gotta get in and out. I pull in and out of the driveway. There's another car in there already it's a hobby car that I'm working on. So it's already taken up.
But there's not space between the garage and the sidewalk.
Well, not if there's another car there. So you actually have 3 cars,
3
one of
cars.
which is a hobby car.
Hobby car, yeah.
What I'm saying is that the garage door is just a couple feet behind the sidewalk. So you wouldn't be able to, say, park in the driveway without blocking the sidewalk.
Yeah, you have to cross the sidewalk.
Okay, that was sort of my question,
Yeah.
thank you.
And you are the handicap, how many people with handicap live in your
Me,
house?
primarily. My wife is getting there, unfortunately, but she hasn't got her doctor's prescription yet.
So I'm sorry, could you then explain if you're the one person with the car with the disabled placard? why you-
Both cars have a disabled placard. One of them is a work car that I take to work every day. I still have to work. And the other car my wife and I use for recreation or going around town. It gets better gas mileage than my truck. So we come and go pretty regular. We're not taking anything away from the existing. It's just making them dedicated to our own. We come and go regularly. We live there so we'd like to have them with a blue curb. And also, if we go ahead with this, I'm hoping we will, the post that has the sign on it, I've mentioned in my notes also, if you have them, that putting a post in there would make it very difficult to open the door, because there's 4 trees there, very nice trees that we put in with the help of Albany about 20, 30 years ago. They're pretty good size now. I'd like to put the signs on the tree. And I can do that myself.
I think that's a detail you can work out with staff.
Yeah, okay, just want to make my...
We don't need to consider that tonight.
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we noticed about a request for red curbing or for marking the stalls.
No, it's not on there. No.
So I don't think we can consider that.
No, it's only the blue curb.
Okay, so we're just going to address
make
the
another
blue curb
proposal
tonight.
if I want to go ahead or ask for the safety commission to consider that.
We have a different plan for the blue curbs. Actually, it's a problem that, I mean, for the blue curb, for the red curbs, it's a problem that we have in Albany all the time by cars actually parking too close to the intersections. So we are, we're going to map the areas where we're going to red curb at least 20 feet, 18 to 20 feet of red curb by the intersections. And we will do it by sections because it's throughout Albany. So we'll have to notify similar to what we're planning to do with the sidewalks. We're going to notify it by block when we do it. I mean, it's something that it's on the burner right now. Front burner. No.
Sounds like that'll be addressed at some point in the future.
Yeah, good. I just want to make it known that it is a need there.
Things, yeah.
Okay.
I'm aware of that.
Okay. So I've got a couple of requests from the public. If we don't have any more questions from the commission. Great. So Mimi Ritsima.
I'm a neighbor at 706 Madison Street, just a few houses down. And I just first want to say, you know, I love you as neighbors. I'm not really here to really want to say anything against you or anything else. But when I got this flyer, I was very disturbed by it. You know, I've known you for 25 years. Your son has worked on my Volvo. I've, you know, had no complaints about anything. But first of all, it looks to me that there's 51 feet on Madison and 78 feet on Castro that will be used for this project. That's not true.
No, it's not true. It's just available space. That's basically showing the commission the available space in front of their house.
I see. Okay. Because a car length is what, 10 feet?
20 for a parking space.
20 for
20 for
parking
parking.
space. I see.
You want to have a little
Okay.
maneuver room to get in and out.
I see. Well, first of all, our whole area here on Madison is 100% occupied by cars all the time. There's all kinds of jogging for getting that spot. People do try to respect where you have your spot in front of your house and maybe one in your driveway. Now, their house is a corner house, so of course they have two fronts. But should that mean that they get more spots because they have a corner house? All of us have probably one or two cars, so we have to share. How are we going to do that, right? So I think the neighborhood has pretty well tried to share and allow people to park in front of their own house, just out of courtesy. Now, there are many elderly and handicapped people in our neighborhood. My neighbor at 706 who signed this as well, we have in the 20 minutes before this meeting already at least 10 signatures of people who are against you having the blue spots in front of your house. So I would imagine in a day I could probably have every neighbor in the whole block sign this against them having the blue spot. I have my neighbor at 708 has a handicapped child. They have not asked for a blue spot. The neighbor across the street is also very disabled, can hardly walk with Sabio. They don't have a blue spot. I think this is not the solution. I think that we need to work together, try to respect the parking spots. You have a two-car garage that you could easily use to park in or in front of. You also have the other garage on Madison that you use for church meetings. I mean, maybe you need these spots for your church people on Saturday, I don't know. But parking is at a premium, and I think that this would only create more tension in the neighborhood and more lack of cooperation, I think, from neighbors. So I really encourage you to not go this way. All right, thank you. And I would like to submit the names that I've gathered from the neighbors.
Certainly. And Kathleen Ryan also wanted to speak.
Hi, thanks again, Commissioners, for your time and for listening to me. I've been living on 709 for about 3 years now. I love you as neighbors. You are really dear people, and I've loved living on this block. And I do agree with Mimi. It has been a challenge. I have 2 little kids, and especially late at night. And I'm a Unitarian, so we accept all religions. I'm all for spirituality and being at one, being conscious. It has been a challenge, and I really hope we can work out a way to deal with parking without earmarking spaces. That is true. I mean, Cordelia at 701 Madison is now in Japan, and she has complained to me a number of times that when she has people coming over to help her, they have problems finding spaces too. So that's another handicapped person that I added with her email. You can confirm with her that you could add on the list that is handicapped. So that's what, 5 or 6 households within a 2-house radius from mine that would be considering handicap spots too. So, but I know I wish I could be handicap considered because with 2 little kids. But yeah, we all need spaces, and it has been really, really tough. But I love being your neighbors. I love being in this neighborhood, and thanks for being so wonderful.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to comment on this agenda item? No? Okay, so I'll bring it back to the commission.
So my propensity for technical commentary is going to hold true here again.
Good.
One is that blue curbs are not reserved spaces. They're open to anybody. So certainly there's plenty of people in the neighborhood who could use them if they were so inclined. Now, those may not be the closest spaces for them, so that's fine. The other is a little bit of a concern. I don't know that we have a specific policy, and Aleda can correct me if I'm wrong, but ADA standards for parking lots, there's no ADA standards for streets specifically. But for parking lots, it's very explicit about what the maximum slopes are, and even the ramps, in place of stairs and so forth. You look at the Buchanan bike path on the overcrossing. There's a maximum slope that's allowable. Even wheelchair ramps at corners those are the maximum slope, the 8.6% grade. If it's longer than a certain amount, you have to have level landings. And just, I know this street, and looking at the picture, it's clear that the slope of the street's well over that maximum ADA grade. Now, the good news is that these folks aren't relying on wheelchairs, but for wheelchairs, steep slopes are bad. And designating a blue curb means someone in a wheelchair can come along and use it, and we'll have created a non-accessible handicap parking space that doesn't meet the usual ADA standards for a parking space. I say this because the ADA doesn't have standards for on-street parking spaces for blue zones, and it doesn't require them either. The only place where it does require them is in parking lots, and then the standard is very specific. So I'm not saying that we necessarily should say, no, you should never have a blue curb if you're on a steep slope, but it really does raise an issue of what are you creating? You're creating an accessible space that's only accessible to some people and not to others. So that, we already asked if there's an interest in having the blue curb around the corner where it'd be flat and thus accessible to anybody. But I like things to sort of stay close to standard as much as possible, and recognize that slopes are not a good mix with blue curves. Now in this case, again, for people with a particular disability, that's not a problem. I've had temporary handicap placard as a result of injuries, and I didn't have to rely on a wheelchair, so I could have gotten around and I wouldn't have complained. But just kind of leaving that as an open point for consideration. In terms of how many spaces are necessary, again, I understand that there's 2 cars that have handicap plates or placards. Of course, the rules are you can only use a blue space if you are the holder of the placard, not that you're driving a car that has a placard. So if the wife doesn't have a placard and comes along and parks a car in that blue zone, technically she'd be in violation, and we'd have made it harder for her. Maybe the placard's in the works. I frankly hope you don't need it. But there again, I think there are some minor technical considerations in this question of one space versus two spaces. I'm not clear what's the correct thing to do there. So those are my thoughts.
Doug?
I think this is a really hard one. I would support one space. I obviously really appreciate the fact that the city can allow people to have disabled parking in front of their residence if it's necessary. I think, that's a wonderful thing. And as Fareed said, it's not your disabled parking place, it's a parking place for people with disabilities. And if your neighbor chooses to park there, that's their right. It's for anybody. But I understand your point that, at least I think this was the point you were making, that it would be easier for you to have it on is it Castro? But I also can appreciate what Fareed says, that, we're kind of creating a monster in that we've made a parking place that doesn't really work for a lot of people. I think we did talk about this a little bit more, but I certainly would support one space, but unfortunately only one space.
I agree. I think one space, and I actually think on the Madison side, that's flat, to support the idea of what a handicap space should provide. And if there's a significant population, in that area, that might support other neighbors as well. I am concerned with, kind of privatizing the parking unless it's really justified. And I believe it's really justified when it's justified, but I don't think and I would prefer to have it in a safe location.
I agree. I think one space is appropriate. And I hadn't thought about the technical aspect.
Through the chair, I think there is an additional comment from the audience. Want to come to the stand, please?
I just wonder, in your decision-making, do you have any concern that the rest of the neighborhood would be against it? Does that matter to you at all?
I believe we've taken that into consideration, yes.
Well, I don't know. It sounds to me that you're just looking at it just from a legalistic point of view, that a person that's handicapped should have a handicapped spot. And I don't think that really...
Well, I think we've been clear, ma'am,
Yeah.
that we don't believe that we're granting a handicap spot for the sole use.
It would be for the sole use of their house. So I think that is not a realistic view of what will happen in this location. So I really think, you have a generous idea that, yes, maybe other people in the neighborhood would use that spot, but in fact that will not happen, and it will become a private spot. So I think I just wanted to express that I don't think you're looking at this maybe more from a global point of view, but from a realistic point of view, this will just become a private spot. So I just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you for your viewpoint.
Certainly it becomes common that if the person to whom the space is most convenient is likely to use it the most. So where it may be de facto reserved space for one person, other people can show up there and nothing wrong with that. Again, in the two cities that I've worked at, other than Albany, as a traffic engineer, the considerations that we typically look at for whether blue curbs are appropriate tend to start with, are there off-street parking opportunities? And if someone's already got off-street parking, designating an on-street space is generally perceived as then not necessary. Again, that doesn't mean we have to be bound by that. That's someone else's policy. We set our own policies. The neighborhood concern is definitely one that has bearing. If it's a location where there's not much parking, in the sense that people are not parking much, there's a lot of available spaces, you tend to kind of have the approach of, well, is there really a need for designating a space? If you show up and there's 4 open spaces within 100 feet or 150 feet, maybe there's not a need to designate one. If parking is highly impacted, now you've got a case where someone with a disability may have to walk a very long distance, and while that may have a greater impact on the immediate neighbors in terms of the loss of a parking space that they may not all be eligible to use, the need for the person who requested it is much greater. And so there's an irony in that, the sense of where it may be more controversial for the neighborhood to lose a space, may be the situation where it's most necessary for the person who's requesting it. But again, that's got to be taken in the context of what are the alternatives. I do kind of support the general consensus that 1 space is probably what's reasonable. And I'm open to the further details of that.
So in my time on the commission, we've granted one spot. And I do believe, I'm not sure, I mean, it's not a permanent situation, is that correct? I mean,
We have to evaluate it every year.
every year it has to be sort of renewed based on whether there are placards still
That's right.
in evidence. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
But I'm sorry.
We would like you to come up if you can.
Need to take over. Sorry.
The point about taking a parking place away from Madison Avenue, Madison Avenue wouldn't do me any good, because both the entrances to my house, my stairs, main entrance, and then we use the gate for the back door, is on Castro. So I'm only talking about Castro Street. We wouldn't take anything away from what's already being used on Madison, which is dense parking. And I agree, it's too many cars for the parking spaces. So I'm not taking anything away. These are ones we use 99% of the time, ever since we've lived there. And it's open for anybody who's got a handicap placard can use them. If the spaces are full, then I have to go find another place somewhere else. Down on Madison, but there's no places down there. So I drive around for a while. That's all I'm saying.
We've already had a bit of back and forth. I think we're going to keep it with the commission.
If you would pass the paper to the others, you would see at the top it says that if a spot is granted, it should be on Castro as he's requesting. That's what the neighbors have agreed.
Thank you.
Is there liability if we grant it in a place where it is really hilly and someone falls or the wheelchair gets away, if somebody else came with a wheelchair and it got away from them and they had a problem, is there any liability to the city for having?
There would be a liability.
So just to think out loud,
Please.
couple of thoughts. The concept of being able to park across the driveway. You can park across your own driveway, that's fine. We wouldn't be able to put a blue curb across the driveway because then it's not available to everyone. It's only available to the resident. And besides, no one else can park across their driveway anyway, so it would be pointless to do that. That's essentially, I mean, the driveway is essentially in the area where the blue curb, the next space down would be desirable for a blue curb. So it's not too far away from the back gate. The question then is, what's the width of the driveway and how do we prevent other cars from parking too close so the driveway is not usable as a parking space? Because I think it's clear that there's a need. The question is, how do we fulfill the need? And how do we do it without creating a problem or a liability? And short of clearing out space in the garage and using that to park, which would be ideal, how could we solve it on street? And I kind of come back to, if the driveway is wide enough to park in front of, then that's functionally good enough. And do we have to take a step to make sure that no one encroaches on the driveway?
And that would be red curbing
You
the
can do-
edges of the driveway?
Yeah, but you want to do the red curb far enough from the driveway that there's a full 20-foot space without red curb at the driveway. So if the driveway is 20 feet wide, you can put red curb outside of that 20 feet for 3 feet, let's say. That way, no one can encroach within 3 feet of the driveway. But if you're parked directly in front of the driveway, you're also not encroaching into that red curb, which would create a technical violation. So I think there's a way to space a couple feet of red curb on either side of the driveway that leaves a full-size parking space length between them, but that's only usable by the resident.
So I have a question about that. Are you saying it's okay to park across your own driveway?
It is. Well,
How do the police know it's your driveway?
It's
It's not, but it's not enforced unless you call the police to complain about it. So it's kind of a weird loophole. Yeah, staff's right. I'm suggesting something that we would not necessarily say we're officially creating a parking space, but we're making sure the driveway is usable. How the resident chooses to use that driveway, whether they call the police to ticket them for parking in front of their own driveway, is kind of their business. So it's a very roundabout way of tackling this. But if it's between that and, frankly, putting a blue curb on a slope where, the likelihood that someone with a wheelchair is going to have an accident there is not great, but I don't like to create a situation where the potential exists and the city could end up in a lot of trouble.
I just want to say, through the chair, I was going to say something about the driveway. My understanding is also that emergency response, in case there's a fire or some emergency that really need to force the entry, it will be through the driveway. And if it's not likely that that happens, but that's basically what they use to enter a house.
Now I get to be creative. Is there any way of putting a parking spot, thinking of the door of the driveway as a wall and sort of creating a parking spot parallel to the driveway, to the garage? So it kind of tucks in between the sidewalk and the garage?
How would you get into that?
You just,
As creative as you did.
That's a fair question. It doesn't look very wide. I think on the downhill side, it looks wider than the uphill side, and maybe just a perspective issue here. But yeah, I mean, you'd want 7 to 8 feet minimum width for parking space. Well, really 8 feet, because you're up against the wall. You don't want to be scraping against the wall. It's not like being against a curb, where a curb space is 7 or 8 feet wide. Against a wall, you'd add at least another foot. So now we're talking 8 or 9 feet, not, I don't know.
The garage door is 12 feet.
Oh, it's 12 feet back? 12 feet wide. Okay. So it's not even really long enough to be a parking space.
I'm trying.
I know.
I was, well, it's still steep, but I was thinking that approaching the intersection might be a location that is a little bit flatter. I mean, not much, but at least better than a,
Less slope to deal with, closer to the intersection. Also,
Yeah.
shorter distance of slope.
right.
But that doesn't really help, right? If you're too close to Madison, it,
That's my car park right there. It's one of them. I just,
Those are
was worried
cars.
that meeting was taken because the car right behind it, space is open. Many times when I come home from work, it's all taken up. Which means I have to go find another place to park because it's full of space. As I mentioned in the application, twice this year I've had to have cars towed away because they've been there 4 or 5 days. Back in, it's on record, police department. They come down from Jackson, down the hill, and park, it's easy.
Would you like us to study this a little bit more and maybe draw up some dimensions or something like that and bring it back to you at your next meeting?
Bring the slope.
I would just look.
Yeah, I think there's more than we can consider on the fly here.
But I do like Fareed's idea about the, maybe the driveway, somehow working and.
We can look more into the driveway issue and talk to the police department and the fire department and see how they see this. Also, if we consider the driveway, then we might have to do like a turnout, something like that, but.
Yeah, if it's parking in the driveway behind the curb, yeah, there might have to be some physical change.
Yeah.
The question of parking across the driveway.
Across the driveway, that's a question
The
too.
question for the police or fire would be whether the open space at the corner is sufficient access for them that they wouldn't need to worry about the driveway. Especially if we do any kind of red curb at the corner as well to guarantee that that space is more open. And certainly the curb ramp at the corner ought to remain open regardless, but additional red curb there may be necessary from the sounds of what we've been hearing. But I think that would be a good idea to have some of those conversations, do some measurements.
Let us do that
And
and
then
bring it back.
bring it back in, when? November?
Whenever the next meeting is.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
See you again.
Sorry, I'm loading the agenda. It's slow in my machine, but I think we want to go into item number C, the report on the UC Village mixed-use project.
Yes, thank you. This is a verbal report to you this evening. I'm sorry we are working pretty quickly on this, and just in the last few days we've had some good work sessions with the consulting engineers to the city and the design engineers, including John Lehman with BKF, who is here this evening. I wanted to give you a report on the work that we're doing with respect to San Pablo Avenue and the cycle track and some of the other features that we've been talking about, and we now are at a point where we have a lot more detail that we can show you. I'll zoom in on this in a second, but before I do that, just to kind of get everybody oriented, this is the north-south stretch of San Pablo. On the north side, this is what's today the Gill track would be back in this corner of the sheet. This is the proposed grocery store. This is a proposed retail on the corner. This is Monroe Street. Here would be retail along Monroe, and in this area, the blue outline would be the senior housing. And then finally, Cordonices Creek is right there. Dartmouth comes in over here on the right-hand side. And so if you're trying to keep yourself oriented, north is to the left is where we're looking at all this. The challenge that we've been working with the teams on is how to fit the two-way bike path into the public right-of-way along San Pablo Avenue. We have, working through the design team, submitted some comments and questions and preliminary design to Caltrans. We've gotten some good feedback from them, and I think we have a better understanding of the types of design exceptions that are required. And to just kind of give you a little background and context for this, Caltrans has a series of design standards that they apply to all their facilities throughout the state. In some cases, there's just not enough room to do the kinds of things that they'd like to do to space things apart. So there's a, the safety is better for all the users. In this case, there are a series of exceptions that will be required, and they have to do with basically the separation between, zoom in here a little bit more, and then I can also show you a diagram from a different perspective, but the separation between what's going on in the street, the vehicles traveling southbound, a shoulder, a little bit of shoulder for the vehicles, planting strips, the Caltrans terminology is parkway, but that's not really what this is. This is more just a conventional planter strip. The bike lane, the two-way bike lane right here, and then a sidewalk. And then finally here, again zoomed in, this not quite sure what color that is the edge of the building. So we're working with them to try to figure out how to squeeze all this in to make the project work and make the different modes of transportation as safe as possible. The good news is I think we're making progress in fitting it all in. We also are making, I forgot to mention, we do have here, we're showing the pedestrian activated beacon, sometimes called a hawk signal. It's basically a way for a pedestrian or a bicyclist to stop traffic on San Pablo to get across safely to Dartmouth and continue on their way. The design exceptions that we're looking at are to narrow up some of these, the sidewalk and the shoulders between these. So for example, if this was a normal highway, and you'd have a 5-foot planted, as I understand, a 5-foot wide planter strip. And here we're looking at things that maybe more in the 2 to 4 foot range. If it were, again, if we had all the room in the world, it would be a 10-foot wide or more bikeway instead of 8. And here with the sidewalk, we'd have, ideally 10 or 12 feet to really have a comfortable pedestrian experience. I think we're looking at something more in the neighborhood of 6 feet or so. It's technically compliant with ADA requirements, but it's not as comfortable as you might experience walking, say, down Solano Avenue or something like that, where there are wider sidewalks. And later on, John, if you want to correct me on any of the dimensions I'm giving here, I welcome that. I'm going to zoom in on a couple things. Sorry to jump around, but we wanted to show all this on one sheet, and there's a lot of stuff. I'm going to zoom in on a couple of things. These are cross sections. This is, say you're walking on San Pablo southbound towards the grocery store. This is the sidewalk you would use, 6 feet. Here's the bike path, 8 feet, 3.5 foot landing area, and then basically a 2.5 foot gutter or shoulder. And then you'll have vehicles right here. And one of the things that we're taking out in order to accommodate the bike path is we're taking out parking, which is normally kind of a buffer for along a busy street like this, so that the normal shoulder would not be there. One of the things that we're doing is to, at the Monroe and San Pablo intersection, and zoom out for a second, talking about in this area, this is the particular area of concern because bicyclists are going in two ways, pedestrians are going two ways, vehicles are coming and going out this intersection. You can only look at one direction, and say a person who's making a right turn from Monroe onto San Pablo is going to be looking to their left for vehicles, that's the natural instinct, and not necessarily looking to the right for bicyclists or pedestrians. So one of the things to do is elevate this bikeway and basically make it a speed hump. In effect, it's the technical term, I guess, is a speed table. So that's an effect of making people slow down and maybe be aware that they're crossing a two-way bicycle facility and hoping to make sure everybody is paying attention. We'd also do some sort of pavement treatment so the bicyclist is also aware they're about to enter an intersection, hopefully slow down and looking out as well. So this, where I was a second ago, this illustrates the speed table that a vehicle would be going from across this and be about a 14-foot wide speed table. And again, it's basically, in effect, functioning as a speed hump. Another place where this treatment would be used is around the senior housing. If you'll recall, there's a driveway that comes in, a drop-off pickup area here in front for the senior housing, and then another driveway out. Again, having the same principle of pavement treatments and speed tables to alert everybody what's going on. One of the other things that the commission mentioned when you were last talking about this project is the time this was the intersection was designed to accommodate trucks, full-size trucks making a right turn, and in order to do that, the intersection was a little bit wider. The turning radiuses were larger and the intersection was wider. The design team has narrowed this down a little bit, so now a truck making a turn in here might need to maneuver using the oncoming lane of traffic a little bit, but the advantage is it narrows it down to the barest minimum of required roadway. So basically you have one inbound lane on Monroe, which is 12 feet wide, and then two outbound lanes here. There's no extra space, and it's a reduced radius turn there. It's not, from a truck operations perspective, you might want to have a little, if you're driving the truck, you want more room. But if you're a pedestrian or bicyclist, you like the shorter distances because you have less time out in the middle of the intersection where all this stuff is going on. We are squeezing a lot of things into this area, so there are two things that are probably not as good as we would like them to be, and I mentioned them before. First, this planter strip is a little bit smaller than what we would normally like, and because it's between the bikeway and the lane of traffic, it's not going to be able to accommodate street trees. It's both a hazard to a motorist or a bicyclist who kind of veers off the road for one reason or another, and also, at least on the vehicle, on the road, street side of the trees, with trucks and buses and so forth going by, any branch above, there would be no branches below 13 or 14 feet. It would just get knocked off by the first truck coming by. So this planting would be very low to the ground, cover kind of planting, so that if inadvertently a car or a bicyclist or somebody kind of veered into it, there wouldn't be an immediate hazard to them. And then I mentioned before, the sidewalk is a little bit less, is a little bit narrower than would be ideal. The good news is we're not really focusing the pedestrian experience on San Pablo Avenue as much as we're trying to create the pedestrian plaza kind of thing off of the sidewalk, off the immediate area of the sidewalk and between the two retail areas, and then on Monroe, where this graphic doesn't show much of Monroe, but the sidewalks on Monroe would be a little bit wider as well, so that would be a little bit more comfortable for pedestrians. Another feature, again, zooming out again, apologies. Right now, there are two bus stops. There's one right up here near the Marin intersection. It's a layover stop. There are usually buses waiting there for a few minutes. And then there's another one over here just south of Monroe. as this is laying out, this is not a good location south of Monroe for a bus stop. There isn't enough room to do all the things that we're trying to do in the right-of-way and have the bus stop right there. So the idea that we're kicking around is to consolidate the 2 bus stops into one location close to Village Creek, right about here. This is a fair distance away from the senior housing, but according to the developer and operator of the senior housing project, not a lot of their tenants are going to be using public transit. Their average age is 85. The advantage of this location is that it's closer to the grocery store, and AC Transit is interested in having the grocery store and the bus stop as close to one another as they can. And they tell us that, you know, the further people have to walk from the store to the bus stop, the ridership declines pretty quickly. So this is something that we're exploring. It gives, there's not, the other issue that was raised with the bus stop was the interaction between the bicyclists and the pedestrians and the people waiting for the bus and the crossing of one another as a bus arrives. This is an area where there's no development plan, so there's a potential of having a little bit more elbow room so we can create the space that that either the bus stop is on one side or the other of the, I think the preference is to keep the bus stop on the road side of the bikeway and kind of wind a bikeway around ultimately towards Marin when it is the final link is put in. We have not yet consulted with AC Transit on this particular location, so we'll try to do that right away, and we may come back with having to revise it a little bit more after that consultation. Another challenge that we're working through that we don't have an answer to, but we're sensitive to, is trying to keep an option open for the Class 2, this is the bikeway that's in this complete street study, the Class 2 bikeway that was on this side of the street, the northbound. So there's a place for the northbound bicyclists to go. I'm going to switch back over to the complete street study for a second just to show you. And again, this is kind of answering a question that came up earlier this evening. So right now, the complete street study doesn't show the bike path on the south side, ignoring that for a second, but there is this Class 2 separated from the lane of traffic, but taking out the parking. And we want to try to, switching back to the current plan, we want to try to make all this work so that we retain that option to ultimately put in that northbound bikeway if we want. The other area that needs refinement is around the senior housing in Cordonices Creek. This is an important linkage where people are traveling down Dartmouth, they cross San Pablo, and they're trying to get to the creek. We're trying to get into University Village. This is a little, there's some refinements, and we're sensitive to the fact that there's a lot going on. There's pedestrians, there's motorists leaving the senior housing complex, the bicyclists who are making various kinds of transitions. If they're continuing southbound, they're getting on the street. If they're going to the creek. Anyhow, there's a lot going on, and we realize that this area needs to be fine-tuned a little bit to eliminate as many conflicts as possible. The other thing that we're thinking about is coming back to the Monroe intersection. Right now, this is showing the pedestrian crossing on the south side of the street, which is essentially the existing condition. You can see the existing condition on the photograph that this is overlaid on. And right now, there's no pedestrian crossing on the north side of the intersection. We're talking about whether or not we do need a pedestrian crossing here, or whether there should be another one further up the street in mid-block someplace, and what safety features that needs to have in order to be an effective and safe crossing for pedestrians. But as it stands now, I'm going to zoom out again a little bit. If you're shopping with this plan, if you're shopping at the store and you're walking home, if you're going southbound, you'd have to go across this street, you'd have to cross Monroe, and then cross this crosswalk, and then you proceed on east or south or wherever you're going. And if you're going north or northeast, you would have to walk up to Marin and cross there. It's a long segment. Now, there aren't any residences immediately across the street, so maybe it's not a big deal, but still a long segment without a pedestrian crossing. And we want to avoid a situation where people are tempted to kind of just dash across and hope for the best. And then the final point that we're working on is just the details for for bicyclists as they're making the various maneuvers in and out of Monroe. We recognize that Monroe will continue to be used by bicyclists who are a little higher speed or more comfortable in the roadway, and just making sure that this all works, that there's a comfortable and safe way for them to get across, including making the connection over onto Dartmouth and heading east that way, probably towards the university for people who live in the University Village and going to campus. So again, I'm sorry to kind of dump this on you verbally with a last-minute report, but we're sharing it with you pretty much as we get it. This has evolved a lot in the last day or so, and we'll pause here to see if I can answer any of your questions.
Questions?
Only comments. I'll hold those.
I have a question. Back at the north end, near the bus stop, in our complete streets plan, I think we have an on-street bike lane on the southbound. There's a little stub of it there.
Right there. So, but this plan that we're looking at on the screen doesn't show the cycle track. So the cycle track, the two-way bike path is basically replacing that.
I'm interested in the transition from the southbound San Pablo north of the project to along the project. So if you were cycling, for example, southbound, how would you transition to the cycle track?
We'd have to do a curb cut, and you would basically be in the lane here, and there would have to be some sort of, as an interim solution, it would be some sort of curb cut here to get you back up onto the cycle track. Long term, would expect that there would be a continuation of the bike path.
Well,
so you would get on back at Marin.
Where you might have the same issue, but slightly different.
Yeah, southbound, or northbound, I'm sorry, is the problem, because you're on the cycle track and then you hit the end, you got nowhere to go. So the interim, the only thing I see is you turn left onto the path that goes behind the grocery store. There's no other legal path of travel for a bike there in the interim condition. In the long term, yeah, we can come up with something else, but either you extend the cycle track or something happens, but short term, that's the end of it. The point of the cycle track was to get people to Sprouts from Dartmouth and elsewhere, and it's achieved that. So at that point, you can't continue it northbound.
So would you have some kind of signage that told people, like this only goes 100 feet or however far it goes?
What we're worried about is the reality is people are probably just going to keep on riding on the sidewalk, and it's not a very good sidewalk. It's not very wide.
But better than on the street.
If you're looking at doing a pedestrian crossing somewhere around there, would it be worth looking at somehow getting the bikes going that direction?
So doing
another hawk?
Doing
I don't know. I mean, that's
kind of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the other side.
That might be the solution. But that hasn't been proposed to Caltrans. I'm not sure how they would feel about that, but from a routing perspective, that's probably the best interim solution.
I heard you say that there's no residents, down there. I think this development is like going to give life to that space. I mean, who knows what's going to go on the other. It's like if we can build it in a way that can be prescient of what could happen, it would be really good.
So we're supposed to just be asking questions at this point.
Okay, sorry. So I do have a question. In the complete streets kind of mantra, I think a question that I have not asked, I remember asking about Sprouts on the north side, you know, where it's just the wall and there's a path in the back, but I've never asked in the drawings and the plans for both the senior housing and Sprouts, are there any windows onto the San Pablo in the plans? I mean, is there any engagement of these buildings to San Pablo? Because I see how we're pulling everything kind of, so the pedestrians more friendly as we come off of San Pablo, and it's like in Complete Streets, they talk a lot about engagement with the street. But I've never asked that. So.
I can show you what the side of the building will look like. This is probably as good as anything. I'll zoom in on it.
Well, those look like windows.
It's nice, the architecture is nice, there's landscaping, there's some bike racks here, but there are no windows or openings until you get right here. And some of those are translucent, so you see light and things, but you won't actually. The first kind of engaging thing is when you get to the actual corner of the building, and then there's that big plaza.
It kind of looks a lot like Beverages and More, which is when we walked by there, they were like, this is
It will look better than that, but
well,
layout is.
yeah, but I mean, this is the same idea, right?
Yeah. The problem with grocery stores are three sides of it are basically blank. It's from the retailer perspective, they don't like windows.
Yeah. No. And what about the senior center?
That is, bear with me, this file is really big and it gets slow. Oops. Sometimes. So this is the San Pablo side. Oh, and it even shows a bicyclist. There you go. This is basically the parking area, the parking structure. So again, it's going to be open air, but it's not going to be tremendously engaging until you get down to the entrance down here, where then I think that's a kind of a nice engaging driveway entrance.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So I've got a couple. The light at Monroe and San Pablo, there's a light right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And the cycle track goes across Monroe. Is it the expectation on a north-south red light that the cyclists would stop, or do they just go through the red light? And I mean, I can see that could be a real conflict. The driver's got the green light and he's looking, and people are still going by. How does that work?
The bicyclist is absolutely going to have to stop because vehicles.
Okay.
This is going to be a busy intersection.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, but it doesn't always work.
If they don't, we'll have to install like railroad-style crossing gates to come down.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said the width was reduced a little bit. Do you know how much it was reduced?
John, do you?
It's down to 50 feet.
And what was it before? Do you remember? I'm just concerned if the trucks are going to be turning into that lane, it's still really wide. Is it worth the trade-off? I don't know.
From a pedestrian safety perspective, I think it's better this way.
Okay.
The vehicle movement perspective is a little bit more challenging because the kind of the worst case scenario is a truck starts to make the right turn into the project. There's someone coming out, wants to make a left turn out. They come up here and stop at the red light, and then the truck kind of needs a little piece of their corner of their lane. And if there's already a car sitting here waiting, the truck kind of has to wait till that person gets out of the way. And people usually make it works out all right.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy turn for the trucker. But that's kind of the idea. Because if it's an easy turn, they do it faster, and other people will do it faster.
No, I understand that. I was just wondering if the trade-off was worth it. It sounds like you think it is.
Could you give us an idea of how many truck deliveries a day?
To the grocery store, it's probably 2 or 3. It's not a lot of the big ones. Then there are the Pepsi trucks and those kinds of things that are a little bit easier to maneuver. But there's also the 970 units of housing that are going to have their normal truck traffic. And the 175 units have senior housing with a fair amount of turnover there with moving vans coming and going. So, 10 or 12 a day, maybe, something in that neighborhood.
Would you like to come up?
Beth, can you come up so we can? This is, well, I'll let her introduce herself. Never mind, I was about to introduce you, but I'll let you do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to speak to the issue about the truck turns. So we actually requested that the radius on the corner be reduced on that, the northwest corner of the intersection, because of that concern about the speed of turns. Not so much the speed of the truck turns, but all the passenger cars that could take the turn at higher speed because of the large radius. And then the other thing, to the extent that truckers could just, proceed without having to stop and make the turn carefully, we hear of cyclists, of crashes between tractor trailers, large trucks, and cyclists, making the news. And we don't really hear of, head-on collisions between these large trucks and people in passenger cars, trying to leave a side street. So what the data is showing us is the bigger issue is the safety for the pedestrians and bicyclists and interacting with these vehicles, making these right turns if the corner radius is too large. And so considering both the sidewalk and the bike path, and that it's a two-way path, so you have to look for bicyclists coming in two directions, that was what was behind our request to reduce the radius there, and then that reduced the crossing distance in turn.
Great, thank you.
So, thank you.
And I have one more question, which kind of goes back to an earlier point about the fire department. Is this the time that we should be concerned about, I think there's no left turn now going southbound on San Pablo onto Dartmouth, or Dartmouth going west, turning left onto San Pablo. And I think both of those that they would like to be able to do, and obviously they don't follow the same street rules, but just to be sure that they can do it. Is this the time to be concerned about that intersection?
Yes, it is the time to be concerned about it, and it's a good comment that we should make sure that they can make the maneuver either before they, right now I think this is drawn as paint, although some median treatment would really be nice, and something that we may want to propose to the development teams, but leave a gap either before or after so the trucks can make that maneuver onto Dartmouth.
And conversely from Dartmouth onto San Pablo?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing, speaking of fire engines, the other consideration that we're taking in mind is there will be a lot of medical calls at the senior housing complex, and to create a fire truck red zone basically over here, so that on a medical call there an ambulance responds and the pumper truck responds. The ambulance can use the driveway and will use the driveway. The pumper truck won't do that, but instead they'll be able to park in a red zone here and not block traffic. They're usually on a call like this, a place like this for 15, 20 minutes, so it'd be better not to have them blocking the flow of traffic.
There's a restaurant or a food facility inside of the senior complex?
Yes.
And that would take deliveries in the back?
Right.
Okay.
Another truck I didn't consider when I was doing the math in my head of how many trucks, so yeah, they'll probably get one or two a day.
Yeah. And then I guess I'm thinking again, what's the preferred path for bicyclists going south on San Pablo from the cycle track?
That's part of what we feel needs
Still
a
in
little bit of
progress.
refinement here, whether it's just right here, the bicyclist goes off, but that's a pedestrian crossing, that may not be such a good idea. Maybe it's over here in this driveway where the vehicles are, but I don't know. It needs to be worked out.
Okay. Freed, do you have any questions?
I don't. I just have lots of comments.
Okay.
I'll wait.
All right. Susan, you had a chance. So I think we'll open it up to public comment at this point.
Hi, I'm Harry Chomsky.
I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and there are many improvements, small improvements that I think are going to make a big difference, and I appreciate the creativity of everyone involved and really paying attention to the needs and finding good ways to take care of them. My question that remains is about where the bicycle path crosses Monroe, and you mentioned that for cars on Monroe there will be a speed table. I guess I'm looking for a little clarification about the elevation. So the bike path is at sidewalk level when it's alongside a building. Then when the sidewalk and bike path cross Monroe, they're going to be on a speed table. Is that an elevation somewhere in between the street level and the sidewalk level, or is it staying at sidewalk level?
I'll probably tackle that one.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's a dimension on this.
Well, maybe rather than wait till comment, I'll just answer the question now, which is to say that a speed table typically ought to be about 3 inches high. Curb height's usually 6 inches. So what you'd want to do is the sidewalk level path and sidewalk would have to dip down 3 inches. So rather than a full length ADA ramp, you'd have a half height one. And so you'd split the difference between street level and the sidewalk level for the speed table.
Okay, so as a cyclist, I would see that I'm entering an intersection because my grade would change.
Right, the pedestrians get the truncated domes. You probably maybe don't want that across the bike path, although maybe that would be the treatment to use.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have something to really make it clear that this is not a continuation of the sidewalk. This is a crossing. This is a place where you need to stop and look at the signal. Look at the walk signal. I mean, I don't know exactly what kind of signal there will be here, but I'm hoping there will be something visible to a cyclist to show when they have right of way to cross and when they don't. And also, I know we've run into trouble with the Buchanan path and the question of motor vehicles making right turns across the path during the green phase of the signal when everyone thinks they have right of way and everyone's traveling parallel, but then suddenly the motor vehicle makes a right turn. And it seems like those same problems are going to come up here. I know you have some ideas in mind about how to address that on Buchanan, and I'm curious if you are planning to use those same approaches here, or... Thanks.
Thank you.
What can I just interject? We're thinking also using the same approaches on Buchanan that we use on Buchanan, like the blank out signal, a signal phase just for the with blank out with leading pedestrian interval, and then or maybe bicycle phase, but it's something that we're considering.
Hi, Ed Fields again. I had a comment, but I think maybe the question first. How will employees of the assisted living facility be entering the parking lot? Will they be using San Pablo, or can they come in from, is there a back entrance that they can use?
Both.
Both. Okay, I mean, the only concern that I have, I mean, much as we would like them to cycle or take the bus, my experience with assisted living facilities is that you have a large turnover at 3 o'clock or some time like that, and those people have all come to work at 6 in the morning, so maybe they didn't take the bus or BART as easily. I mean, it is running, and then the shift coming on at 3 or 4 is getting off at 11 or midnight and not so wanting to take public transportation. So you may have a fair number of people, I don't know what the sort of the combined AM and PM staff of the facility is, crossing through there if they're using the San Pablo entrance into the parking lot.
Hi, Commission, staff, thank you so much for spending so much time on looking at all the details of this and trying to make it work. And to the engineering firms that are involved with the developers, definitely appreciate it. I guess I would just second what Ed just said. If the driveway, the first driveway that is encountered going southbound on San Pablo is inbound only. In other words, people can turn in but not go out, and they have to go out the backside and then around Monroe. That would cut down the traffic across the bike path there quite a bit. So on the sidewalks, that might be one way to help resolve some of those concerns. I'm also, I'm quite encouraged that there might be a solution to the bus stop issue in the offing, because that's something that Strollers and Rollers has been raising meeting after meeting after meeting, that didn't work. So I'm pretty excited to see some progress on that. I would think as well the truncated domes across the bike path would make sense. I mean, that exists on the West Street path, that exists on the Ohlone Greenway. I mean, it's fairly common, and I'd be concerned that if they weren't there, that some blind or sight impaired individual might, unintentionally end up on the path and then wander right out into the street. That definitely would be far worse than having the truncated domes in the bike path. I'm also curious about the connection from the Dartmouth Bikeway to the Cornesis Creek path. So the cycle track or the bike path is not shown as continuing south from Dartmouth and making that connection. So I'm not quite sure how people who are cycling would do that. I mean, they're going to do it. Obviously, they're going to do it, but in terms of how it's engineered, it's an interesting question. People riding southbound on San Pablo, how they enter the cycle track at the north end or get off the cycle track and back onto San Pablo at the south end. Because my impression has been that people who are riding long distance on San Pablo probably aren't going to get on that path because it's going to be fairly congested and not the kind of facility that is as akin to what they're used to riding and the speed they want to ride on. But of course, that doesn't mean you can ignore the engineering of it. So that's definitely a tricky issue. And I think with that, I'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your efforts on this. And I think it's a very exciting development, and we're excited to see it go forward.
Seeing no other comments, bring it back to the commission. Freed, you
jump in because so we kind of touched on the raised crosswalk. As I said, what I envision, which is certainly subject to the engineer's work, is that the height of that speed table would be about 3 inches over what would otherwise be the pavement height. That's what's reasonable for 15 to 25 mile an hour travel speed. More than that, it gets really abrupt, and I think it'd be problematic for the buses and even just passenger cars going up over that kind of height. So that's, like I say, you kind of bring the street up and you bring the sidewalk down. You do both of those. Preston's right, truncated domes across the full width of the path, totally fine. As I think about it, there's so many path crossings that have those. It's not a hazard for the cyclists, and it's pretty critical for anyone with visual impairments. The separation, the little landscape strip between the vehicular roadway and the cycle track, I was just kind of contemplating switching the sidewalk and the cycle track. Would that get us a loophole around the standard 5-foot separation? And I don't think that's worth it because the pedestrians being next to the street's not much better. I know we don't want to create any kind of crash obstacle or what have you, but I kind of was pondering whether a railing might be something worth considering in there. Just a thought. Well, K-rail wouldn't be very attractive, but a metal rail, like a fence with a solid tubular top rail or something like that. So again, depending on how that's done, if you do vertical post that comes in several inches, it's hooked on the top, sort of an upside down L, and you put your rail there. Bikes aren't going to catch their handlebars on the vertical, but you can think of it as a rub rail right there, so that if they're kind of losing their balance, tipping towards the street, there's something to slide along that pushes you back into the path. So I would contemplate doing something like that if Caltrans is amenable to it. We touched on having a pedestrian lead phase for the Monroe crosswalk with the blank out signs. I think that's a very good idea. We're setting up the kind of the standard for that in a lot of places, and I think it's a good one to replicate here. Again, it could be, we'd have to decide whether it's only when someone pushes the pedestrian crossing button or if we just use that all the time. San Pablo is going to have enough green time that pushing the ped button to get a walk signal isn't about the length of the time, it's just whether or not the walk signal comes on. We looked at the, let's see, southbound bike transition to Monroe, right on here where you've got the cross-hatching in the middle of the street. I think the Complete Streets plan showing the left turn lane for the on-street cyclists there. We should definitely try to do that. If we, rather than a raised curb because we want to have fire access to Monroe, just do textured concrete for the rest of it, we could do that sort of against the east side of that median area, but then the rest of it be flat pavement for a bike left turn lane. Going back to the intersection of Monroe and San Pablo, the question of when the trucks are making the right turn and interfering with the outbound left turns from Monroe, I think that's a good place to look at an advanced stop bar, move the stop bar back, possibly significantly, and while we're at it, stick a bike box in front of it. Let's see, sorry, I keep making you bounce back and forth,
That's right.
Jeff, but if we go to the south end of the cycle track, I think the best place for the bikes on the cycle track to exit onto San Pablo would be into the red zone for the fire trucks, basically right at the creek, so that they're not exiting out into a traffic lane, but exiting into what would otherwise be the parking lane is a safer, more comfortable place to exit. Plus, they're going to have to get that far to transition to the Cordonesis Creek path anyway. And then if we go all the way back to the north end, I really should have put these in order, I'm sorry. I kind of touched on that already. I think the idea that there's an interim solution and then possibly a long-term solution depending on what else gets developed definitely is the way we have to think about this. In the interim, that northbound cycle track lane really is, in my mind, just a short dead-end link to take you to Sprouts. The only reason for a northbound cyclist on San Pablo to cross over to the west side is because they're going to the grocery store. So to say that we're creating a dead end doesn't concern me that much as long as we do a clean treatment at the dead end. That may mean that at Monroe we've got a sign that basically says northbound bike lane ends ahead. So we can figure out the wording, but I agree that you don't want people to get there and suddenly find out they're trapped. But that we definitely put some treatment there at the end to prevent them from popping out into the street traveling the wrong way. Maybe that the railing or whatever we've got sort of turns and sort of forces a turn onto the path. Even if it's a sidewalk, that's better, frankly. I just really worry about them popping out into traffic headed the wrong direction. So those are all my comments.
I don't really have any comments that are unique, so I'll pass it off.
I think I already said my piece.
I think I covered in mostly my questions. And I'm excited that this level of planning is going on. Thank you for presenting that.
Sure.
With that, I think we'll move on to our next item. Thank you very much. This will be a report on the update to the general plan process.
This will be this is kind of would be a standing agenda item for the next year or two. Our primary focus for the last few months has been updating our housing element portion of the general plan. We really haven't done anything in the land use or transportation planning part of it. We will be taking the Complete Streets report if it's accepted by the city council, and you'll see it again in a different form, in the form of the general plan policies and programs. The other thing, perhaps since we've last given you a report, is we have hired a consultant to prepare an environmental impact report for the general plan. The firm is LSA. You may be familiar with them. They've done some other projects for us in recent years. They'll be gearing up, now that we're kind of completed a phase of work on the housing element, we're going to be getting back into the land use issues, into the environmental review, starting the environmental review process in the next few months. And as is normal in something like that, we'll have a scoping session early on to ask people what kind of environmental issues they want to make sure we cover, like what kind of intersections or roadway segments we should be looking at. And we'll let you know when that happens. It's probably a few months away, but it is something that's on the horizon that would be of interest to the Traffic and Safety Commission. That's about it for now. Did I answer any questions?
No questions? Public comment? Seeing none? I think we can move on. Next one is item E, report on Washington Avenue traffic calming project.
So, do we have to walk in?
We should do it the same way we did last time. Which was, well, since we already drew straws, we should stay consistent, because if you and I switch back and forth, there's not a continuity, plus then we both have input, which is probably contrary to the principle that we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
So I will head out.
Thank you.
And I'm afraid Aleda is going to, if you see Aleda, send her in, because this is her report.
Well, we'll take just a moment to wait for Aleda then. I think we were supposed to spend more time talking about the previous item.
I'm sorry, yeah, you want to hear, I can tell you about the housing element.
Yeah, please.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or can I read up on it somewhere, I'm sure.
It's actually been a fascinating process. The housing element is in the spotlight these days because of the issues that are being raised with homeless on the bulb and the fact that we're behind schedule in updating our housing element. Basically, under state law, we need to have in the general plan locations, policies in place to be able to accommodate, I think our number is 276 units of housing, more new housing in the city of Albany. And it's actually not, it's relatively, I won't say it's not difficult. It's possible to find the locations for 276 units of housing. The challenging part of it is the housing that needs to be affordable to people who are at various, median income or below median income in the area. And that's where we've really been challenged. We don't have the financial resources, and in some cases don't have the legal authority to just tell people you got to make it affordable. So we can't subsidize it. We don't have the money to subsidize it, and we don't have the authority to impose the regulations on people. But nonetheless, the housing element identifies 36 different policy actions that we're going to be undertaking in the next year to try to create the opportunity where we can create the affordable housing directly, or the opportunity for affordable housing to occur or when the financial resources become available. A lot of the housing would occur along San Pablo Avenue. And a key part of this actually does circle back. I'm getting to something that's of interest to the Commission. It's just occurring to me. Is Measure D in our parking standards that require basically 2 parking spaces for new units. It's a real constraint to developing housing. The City Council has asked for a report on Measure D and to discuss the potential of putting something on the ballot to change Measure D, to potentially reduce the parking requirements. And so that's going to be going to the City Council on November 4th, I believe is the Monday. Monday to November 4th. And I would not be surprised if coming out of that is a recommendation for the Commission to work with planning and zoning, sustainability, perhaps others, to think through the policy issues that would go along with amending Measure D. So that is, I think, most recently inspired by the housing, it's been a topic of discussion for many years, but I think this housing element discussion has been the catalyst to bring it to the forefront to the council members.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much longer I can go on. Actually, I'm afraid I could go on longer. I'm not sure how much longer you really want me to. So anyhow, back to the housing element, just while we're waiting. We now will send it tomorrow. We'll be sending our draft housing element to the state for their review.
Great.
And they have 60 days to review it and give us comments back. They always give very extensive comments back. And then she's here. We'll finish the general plan report.
That was very interesting. Thank you.
That was interesting. I appreciate it.
Okay, Washington Avenue. Are you going to announce, or you already announced
I did.
Okay. Excuse me. For Washington Avenue, I communicated with Francis Chapman and also sent an email, a response that he sent me some time ago. He thinks that he's suggesting that he will talk to the neighborhood and see what other solutions they can present before we do the red curbing. The red curbing, when I talked to him about red curbing one side, he seemed that it was a good idea, an option to consider, but not. He doesn't want to speak for the neighborhood. It's basically the idea has to be brought back before the neighborhood and then make a decision. I told him about the next steps, which is basically trying to install a temporary pedestrian crosswalk, raised crosswalk or raised hump by the area where the study recommended its location, and also some planters by the bulb out recommended at the intersection of Cerrito and Washington. The planters were installed not in the right alignment today, but were left there with some, it's the agave plant that is there. I immediately received an email from the resident that lives immediately in front of where we left the plant and saying that that's the place where she parks. So I said that they're not permanent, they're temporary. We're going to test it for about 2.5 weeks. We're going to measure the speeds again and see if there's less volume coming from San Pablo Avenue and see how the planters affect the operations of the street. That's one of the measures to decrease volume on that street. But in November, we're going to invite the neighborhood to come here and present these ideas for red curbing, basically. There are two ideas. One is, as you know, there's this staggered idea, red curbing, that more or less exists today. And then there is the one side only, which would be, according to my opinion, better for pedestrians navigating through the street with a raised crosswalk. It has to be with a crosswalk to basically the Catherine's Walk. I mean, that's one destination, but that's the idea right now. Other than that, we will hear from the community, from the residents there, and they will hear our perspective, our proposals there, and see how we can actually implement those. The other thing is that we haven't removed the barricades. We think that we should leave them there. The barricades are having an effect on volume, as we showed last time. And basically the speeds to 22 is not a high speed. It's considered high because the speed limit there is 15, but 22 miles per hour is really not speeding. I mean, not considered a fast speed. I'm not going to say speeding, but I mean, if we go into the terms of the speed limit, it is speeding, but it's not fast. So that's my report. Any questions?
No, not at this time.
Let's see what happens next month.
Yeah, thanks for the report.
Mhm.
Let's move on to item F, report on the Marin Bikeway construction activities.
Okay, you'll see that the project is almost.
Yes.
Oh. You'll see that the project is almost complete. We still have to solve some issues with the contractor. There's a punch list that they have to go through and complete certain tasks that they haven't. But in addition, we're manufacturing some signage for the intersection of San Pablo and Marin and Buchanan and Jackson. There's also, we observed a couple of times that vehicles are actually traveling westbound on Buchanan and taking the old Buchanan Street that was available. So there were two observations that vehicles still do that. So we have to really think about maybe part of another project, a way to, when we widen the ramps, a way to deter these vehicles or anybody to actually take that.
Where are you talking? Say that again?
That is by Pierce, the Buchanan Avenue.
You mean they put the curb up?
They're actually driving up. They're basically trucks that actually drive by. And we observed two of them doing it. The other observation I had is that...
Planters there? No, because the bike...
Well, it's supposed to be emergency vehicle access.
Right. So it is. So we have, I've been thinking about what we can do. There is also signage. We can say it's only for bicycles, vehicles prohibited. So that's one thought. And the other thought is to do it with some kind of physical barriers. But then the other observation is that, two observations. One is that a couple of bicyclists coming from the overcrossing from the waterfront in the eastbound direction continue on the bike lane in the wrong direction. So I'm ordering this sign, already is being manufactured right now, that it says bicycles wrong way. So do not enter. So it's a special sign in MUTCD for that. So I'm going to implement it. I'm going to post it by the intersection of Pierce and Buchanan. The other thing I observed is basically what you said before, is that some pedestrians do not use the path at that intersection. They actually continue on the street, on Buchanan. I saw a woman actually walking on Buchanan, using the crosswalk, and didn't go on the bike.
When you start to think about it, like, I didn't think about it for a long time. I walked on the bike, and then like 2 days, and then all of a sudden I realized I'm walking on the bike path. So it is confusing. So we do
right.
sign something.
So the other thing I wanted to mention also is that the plans for the encroachment permit rider that will provide for a permit from Caltrans to have the blank out sign at this intersection of Marin and San Pablo and the right turn arrows. It's at Caltrans right now, and they have a third round of comments that we submitted plans last week to basically addressing those comments, and hopefully we're going to have a solution or a permit by next week. That's what they told me. So with that the blank out sign and the part of what is included, even it's already there on the pavement in this permit, except that we need to install the blank out sign and the turning arrows for the signal. So that's going to be part of another contract, because we want to actually finalize this project with this contractor and finalize there are some issues with him that are not really smooth, but so that's what we want to do. We want to go through a different contract, and another update is the fact that Caltrans is going to be updating upgrading all the controllers on San Pablo Avenue. And I think it's part of the I-80 ICM corridor study, and from the 170, which is the one, the type we have right now, it's going to be upgraded to 2070, I think it is. And then with that controller, we can have the leading pedestrian interval and even implementing the bicycle phase would be easier than with this controller. And with that said, we didn't implement the leading pedestrian interval this time because this controller does not allow that. So what we did is a 4 or 5 second red clearance at that intersection, and also we set everything to pedestrian recall. So there's a pedestrian recall, even if pedestrians press the button, there's going to be the pedestrian indication with the seconds. So that's basically the only thing we could do with this controller, but that's what we do. There is also signage that is being ordered for Jackson and Buchanan, as I mentioned that before, addressing Amy Smollin's comments. So I responded and I copied you. I don't know if you had time to read the email that I sent to her. That's basically my report.
Great. Any questions?
Just comment.
I have one question. On eastbound Buchanan, after you come off the freeway, since the light is there, it appears very unscientifically, but a couple of times I've noticed the traffic is really backing up, like almost to the freeway, or maybe even past the freeway. Is that being monitored at all, just to kind of figure it out? And I don't know, maybe there was an accident I didn't see or something, but it was just kind of a big mess.
Right. This Monday, Alameda County came back to observe, because I think over the weekend there was a big, I don't know what happened to the controller. Somebody, I don't know.
And it was the weekend was when I saw it. It was a mess.
So it's, they came on Monday and they fixed the situation. It was no communication between one phase and another. So I don't know why that happened. But there's been a lot of electrical work going on, and that might be the reason. We don't know exactly why that happened, but it might be somebody touched the controller. It might be the contractor. Who knows?
Squirrel.
A comment, but I live on Pierce, and it's been amazing to have that. I thought there would be a lot of problem. You know, it's amazing to me how transformative it can be, and yet not really an issue. It's that I've seen, that I've experienced. I mean, I didn't experience whatever happened this weekend, but I think it's amazing. It makes it easier for me to come home, you know, when I'm in a car, and it is my commute on bike or walking too, so it's really made a huge difference. Thank you very much for all of it.
And as usual with every project, we need some 3-4 months of monitoring, and I really appreciate any comments, any suggestions from the residents or from people who use the intersection and let me know what they observe, and then we can maybe tweak it or solve it.
Yeah, particularly after a few weeks, once people get the novelty wears off, and then just kind of the regular routine, if we start to see some weird cueings or people trying to do things that we didn't mean for them to do, we can, I think there was a lot of concern about a lot of people making a left turn from Buchanan onto Pierce, and maybe that's not happening.
Well, you know, I use that now, but I also, if I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I also go on to the next one if I know that I'm not going to make the light, so I go on and do what I normally do. So it's kind of evening out maybe. It is for me, so I can do either, and I feel comfortable doing both, and it's great if I know that I can do the left-hand turn, because I haven't been able to do that in many, many years. A long, long time ago we used to be able to do it. It's been a long time.
Any other questions? Public comment?
Hi. Well, the path is great. What can I say? It's been a wonderful experience using it and using it with my family. And thanks for your attention to the right hook problems that I mentioned before. And I guess I just am not fully understanding all the treatments that are being planned to go in and when they're going in and what order they're going in. And in particular, about the blank out signs, maybe I just need a little bit of more explanation of how they work, but is it my understanding that the blank out sign is active only during the few seconds of leading pedestrian interval?
Yeah, that's the idea. So the pedestrians can actually use the intersection without the conflicting movements of the vehicles.
Okay, so the point is to keep people from turning right on red during the time when the pedestrians have that leading interval. So
That's right.
And are blank out signs being applied at both Jackson and San Pablo?
Right now, it's only for San Pablo. There is a suggestion in the complete streets to actually have one at Jackson.
At Jackson.
And I have to get money for that.
Okay, so for now, the treatment at Jackson is
It's only signage.
Okay, and the leading interval is already in
And
place?
It's as of last week.
Okay, and the signage, do you have an estimate of when that can be installed? Or?
Hawking signs, I've been sending emails. I received a proof, they call it a proof, because I was concerned about if he understood the direction of the arrow that I was asking him, because I gave him the two examples and I just said, okay. So I just want to know if you have, can you send a proof? And he sent it last week. We said it's okay, and haven't heard from him anymore. So I sent an email today reminding him. So, but they're being made. So
okay, but are we talking within a few weeks then? Or?
I think maybe by tomorrow he's going to respond.
Okay.
I think he's going to respond by tomorrow.
So
at
final
latest by
installation,
Monday.
Final installation
Next week, if we get it tomorrow, it's going to be next week.
Great. And at San Pablo, so there will be a blank out signal at San Pablo. That means there will also be a leading pedestrian interval at San Pablo?
For San Pablo, and that's what I said, San Pablo, we need the rider from Caltrans first.
To get the leading pedestrian interval? Or?
The leading pedestrian interval has to be done using another controller, because the one that we have does not support that.
Okay, but is Caltrans approving the leading pedestrian interval?
Yeah, Caltrans, it's approving the leading pedestrian
interval. Okay, that's what I was mainly concerned about.
So the timing, because we want to do it through another contract, it could be that we use our funds to actually upgrade a controller, because it's part of the phase 3 of the Buchanan Bikeway. So we have, in the grant application, we have set aside some funds for traffic signal improvements.
But that's much later.
Well, let me talk to Ray about, the next, the blank out sign can be implemented with the new software on the controller very easily, as long as we have the Caltrans permit, permit rider. And
so that could happen within a matter
I would
of
say
a few weeks?
let's give it about, at the most, 6 months.
6
right
months.
now.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I understand that also Caltrans is replacing the controllers, but their timeline is about 9 to 12 months, so it's a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm. And what about the timeline for opening the right turn lane and changing?
That is going to be
rideshare
until
as
the signage is ready, because the signage that I'm ordering, it says beginning right turn lane, vehicles still to in lieu of the leading pedestrian interval and all of these other treatments, we are having signage only that actually indicates for the vehicles that they have to yield to the bicyclists and pedestrians. That's the only thing that we can do right now in order to open the right turn lane. We have to install the signage
Okay,
first.
so the first step is to put up passive signs, and then you'll open the right turn lane, and then the leading pedestrian interval
will come in about 6 months.
6 months.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, just a follow-up question. So the LPI and the blank out sign would be implemented at the same time when a new controller's
Yeah,
put in?
that is the question. See, I tried with Caltrans technicians. I said we need an LPI, and I said we can. They said we cannot do it right now. It's this software that is here right now does not support that.
And so a difference of 3 to 6 months would be whether the city pays for upgrading the controller from its grant or Caltrans pays for it.
Yeah, as I said before, we have a BTA grant that actually include that that allocation set aside. At the time we applied, we didn't know that Caltrans was going to upgrade.
Right.
So.
I mean, given contingencies and cost overruns, I'm wondering if 3 to 6 months, I mean, I don't know how much a controller costs, but, you know, it's sort of a policy decision, whether it's better to conserve those funds to do something else in the project, or, you know, I don't know. I don't have an answer. That's something
That's
Traffic and Safety
basically our
Commission.
conversation with Jeff and Ray, and see how we can actually see if we can wait the 9 months.
Right.
I hope it's really 9 months. It's not going to be 2 years, you know.
Right,
So it's
that's
just,
the question, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Comments from the commission?
For the issue with cars trying to continue traveling, or trucks maybe down the path that they're used to using that doesn't exist anymore at the end of Buchanan, especially when we widen the ramps for the bikes. I'm sure that there's a lot of things you can look at. One that I'd suggest considering is just like a collapsible bollard in the middle of the ramp. And whether you put a sign on it or not, that's kind of looking at dimensions and spacing to figure out what makes the most sense. But emergency vehicles can run right over it. Technically, trucks can too, but it adds one more layer of "you're not supposed to be here" kind of message. And I think everything positive. Yeah.
But I wanted to add to that. I was thinking a collapsible bollard, and perhaps is this a daytime or a nighttime issue?
we saw it in the daytime.
I wonder if, especially at night, you might want to put reflective material on the light poles that we don't want to have crashed.
Yeah.
That
Right.
might help reinforce that it's no longer a roadway.
Yeah, some of the reflective tape can get wrapped around those posts. The bollard, you can put one of the narrow object marker signs on that one. Like, what is it, the stripes going up to the left, since that's the direction people ought to be going.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, I agree with everything that Susan said about how just amazingly well it works. I had anticipated and figured it was worth the price of the improvements we were doing, that traffic on Pierce was going to be really bad, and it's not. It seems to flow much more smoothly, and it just, it's not creating the kinds of congestion I thought that it might be. You figure out as you're approaching the light, are you going to catch the left turn at Pierce, or are you going to go to the left turn at the next one? That all works out fine. Putting a bike ped sign on the entry to the path on the south side of the intersection really seems like a good idea, because I see plenty of people use it, but I can totally understand where someone would get confused about that.
Yeah. It looks like a mini blood.
Confused if they're on the commission though.
I go with the assumption that it's a shared path. Now, next to the school, there's the path and the sidewalk.
Right.
So there, it's like, okay, there's a different treatment here than there is.
Right.
But again, right next to the school and the park, you kind of expect a lot more pedestrian activity there, and it's, especially with kids, it's good to kind of separate them.
But it is interesting how we plan the hawk signal right there, where it will hook into that sidewalk. So that would be how I would prefer to actually walk, probably, well, depending if it works, but, right, because it would go on to right onto the sidewalk instead of, right at the end of it.
So that'd be good. Last thought I've got on the 2070 controller. You may have already asked, and again, not that it's likely to happen, but it's worth asking Caltrans if they'll credit us for putting the controller in for them early. Who knows?
That's a great question. I'm trying to find the project manager for that project, other than the people I've been talking to.
The IDICM?
To ask that question.
Right.
But I've been talking to David Mann. I don't know if you know him, David Mann, and Einar Acuna.
Yeah.
David Mann.
You might want to try through ACTC to see if they
Right.
can get you.
I'm trying through Kimberly Horn to actually find the
then
right person. Yeah.
You're on the right track.
Yeah, I want to go that way because.
Does that mean there's other uses for the grant money that we can
We
use it
always
for?
have uses for
You
the.
always do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not restrictions on it.
No, as long as this is part of construction, as long as it is used for construction, then they're fine. Mhm.
Good. Like it.
Great. Okay. Let's keep moving. Our next item is report on meetings from the Ad hoc Sub Committee for the updates to the Municipal Code. And this is about the meetings, not about the content of the meetings.
We'll get right on it.
No update since last time.
Right, so I was going to suggest that this might be an opportune time to make a minor commitment to achieve some sort of goal. Not to put too much pressure on.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll achieve some kind of goal.
I'm sorry?
Can I send you a link to the
So,
City of Napa
for
website
example-
for standards?
Oh, the NAPA, I have to check. I was going to check the NAPA standards, actually.
I was impressed you got John Mickey to go to commit, but I haven't made progress.
And I haven't made much progress either. But I was thinking on, for example, on our subcommittee, on transportation-related codes, perhaps we can make a commitment to come up with 3 subparagraphs of code that we could address and make a recommendation on at the next meeting.
I can commit to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and for example, things like the blue curve, guidelines and policy, that's something that we need to revisit. Maybe revisit the traffic calming also. So, I mean, took a year to do it, but we can always enhance it. One thing I always wanted to do with the traffic calming is actually put on the website the types of traffic calming. I think the city of San Francisco has a nice, and I think I mentioned that before here at this forum, there's a nice link to the different types of traffic calming, chicanes and everything, just general applications, just for people to get educated and to know what it is. Because when they think of traffic calming, it's speed humps, always speed humps. And sometimes there's mini circles, there's other things that can be done, or partial entries, partial barriers. I might borrow it from the city of San Francisco.
That sounds good. So, Susan, you're on another subcommittee
Yes.
with Commissioner Mickey.
I will commit to attempting to rope him into a meeting, and you'll have to give me some pointers on that.
Okay. And Fareed, you and I are in a committee for design guidelines. And I would like to commit to looking at the City of Napa's design guidelines, as you've suggested.
Thank you. And I guess I'll ask, maybe if Aleda's got any thoughts on things that are needs that we've got that don't exist within the sample guidelines that I've suggested. I can try to come up with other ones that we use in Berkeley, but
That's good.
they're not as neatly packaged.
Well, let me take a look at it and I'll get back to you.
So I'll just be a resource since I'm familiar with those, and if there's any questions, I will answer them.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this. I realize it's kind of tough sledding sometimes. It's not the most glamorous part of being on a commission, but it's one of those things when we really get in a jam on something, to have a good municipal code standards that we can turn to, it really makes a big difference. So thank you for carving off the time.
Okay. Well, that's a good start. Let's move on.
Yeah. Report on bicycle tour for the active transportation plan striping and signage projects. We had a very good tour. We touched all of the project sites, and Ken McCloskey and Peter Moss, I think, joined us.
Harry Chomsky.
Harry Chomsky, that's right.
was there
Sorry.
too.
So So we went to all of the sites, and we actually indicate Fair and Pierce was Matthew Ridgway and Ryan McLean and another person that I don't remember the name, but he was one of the junior employees there. We indicated the problems and the issues we had with different locations. They took the information. I submitted CAD plans for them, and they are actually designing right now what we're going to do in November. It's going to be November, the third week of November, and I didn't bring the date with me right now. I don't remember, but I can send an email to all of you. We're going to, they're going to have preliminary plans, I think maybe 35% plans drawn, and we're going to take a look. We're going to go back to the locations and see what issues we have, because the CAD plans that I sent them have utilities and everything on them, the different layers, but we sometimes plans do not show reality, so we're going to just confirm what the plans show is basically what we have in reality. Or maybe they show the reality, but they're not in the right location, you know. So it's like we found in the Buchanan Bikeway project that even though we had topo plans and utility plans, in reality they were like 5 feet from what they're supposed to be. So and that for a bicycle path is a big difference. It's a huge difference. So we had to accommodate on site. So we don't want to have those issues with the striping and signage. So we're going to meet with them again, and we think that we can present plans here before this commission either in January or February of 2014.
Great. Questions from the commission? No, must be getting late. Comments from the public?
Thank you to staff and the commissioners for conducting the tour and giving the public the opportunity to participate. Strollers and Rollers suggested a number of relatively minor adjustments or ideas, and I believe most of them were adopted in the field. I don't know if there needs to be a formal process to do that. I mean, we're at the point where it might make sense to adopt a new bicycle facility map for the active transportation plan, do an update. For instance, the current active transportation plan doesn't show a facility on San Pablo, so that would be something that would make sense to follow on the Complete Streets project. And then some of these adjustments, Strolls and Rolls suggested moving routes around or adding routes, you know, for short 1 or 2 block segments. I won't go into the details on that, but it might be good to document that. I mean, again, I don't know what the process is. And there was also a recommendation to Talbot is one of the routes, and there's a one-way block of Talbot at the north end, and there was a recommendation to use that as a test case for making a block a 2-way cycling facility, either by putting in a contraflow cycling lane in that one block or doing a partial barrier or something. You know, that would be a way to get into that issue. And I was told that that would also help in terms of the one-way or motorists driving the wrong way on that block. And I was told that, in fact, when the team was out there, they observed a motorist drive the wrong way the entire block. So that either the contraflow lane or a partial barrier would also help to solve that problem. So we'd be curious what the plans are, how the city received that idea. Thank you.
I think we can, as we move along with these plans, we can actually update the bicycle map in the ATP, where we present these alternatives for the different streets. That's one idea. We can actually go do it at the same time, because you guys are going to see the ATP plans. There's going to be public process, and we can actually, once these plans are approved, we can actually translate it into the ATP And at the same time, we can actually send an update to, first recommendation from this commission to council to update the maps. So everything is according to the plan. That's an option. We can do it another way too. But we can actually, the other way would be just to start right now, maybe in, not November, but maybe in January, actually with the plan, with the map, and then submit it to the commission. But at the same time, that we're going to have some plans to see from the striping and signage. Adopt the plan first, and then continue with the 95% of the striping and signage. That's another option. Maybe we can address it in November.
It must be getting late.
Yeah, maybe we can think about it in November.
Yeah,
So,
I think that sounds good. Definitely, we need an update, and if we're going to be striping and signing, we'll want to probably publicize the routes.
Oh, we wouldn't do that. Because the striping and signage will have a public process on its own. I think we can take advantage of that process and actually do the update of the plan, of the map, of the routes.
Right, and then as we start implementing striping and signage, we'll want to start publicizing the routes, so we'll need that map to
Right.
make available to the public. And, yeah. Other comments, questions? Let's keep moving. So the next item is about the date of the next meeting. And we have an option of either holding a combined November-December meeting on Thursday, December 5th, or keeping the November meeting on the 28th of November, and then having a December meeting on the 17th or 19th of December. Now, the 28th is Thanksgiving.
No, it's the week before, isn't it?
No, Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving is 28th?
28th is Thanksgiving, so,
I'll bring the gravy.
well, we usually do
Okay, we can
have
have turkey.
a holiday party, but we don't usually have it on Thanksgiving.
Sorry about that.
Hey, the better the day, the better the deed or something.
It might be very lightly attended if we have it on the 28th.
Well,
I think
Yeah.
And those of us who've had a lot
purpose.
of turkey may fall asleep.
Right, it could be worse than
things are
usual.
vague now.
Yeah. So,
Well, is there any reason we can't make the 21st?
I won't
I don't
make the
think there is,
21st.
Okay.
Is it 21st?
No.
Yes.
I'll be at a different
do you
transportation
have a
commission
public
meeting on
comment about
21st.
this particular?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Next item.
We're not there yet.
That's Tuesday.
I'm sorry, I missed that entirely. About the future agenda. Great.
I like December 5th.
I
Combine and do December.
Yeah.
Did John say he couldn't come December 5th?
No, I didn't ask the question, and he didn't address that.
I thought he did.
Oh, he did?
I might have lied.
I haven't read his email.
So it probably depends on what content we want.
Yeah,
If we could really combine.
John is not available on the 5th. And not available on the 19th, but would be available for a December 17th meeting.
On the 21st.
What was about the 21st?
Well, Freed can't do the 21st.
Oh, you can do it for you.
Yeah, I've got a transportation commission meeting in Berkeley, November 21st, and a council meeting December 17th.
But John couldn't do the 17th either, right?
No,
He didn't
only
wanna do
the
the
19th.
Okay.
So he and I have,
He's not available on 19th.
Oh, you can do the 17th, okay.
yeah. So I can't make it the days he can, and he can't make it the days I can, so you can pick one of us.
The 19th isn't so great for me, unfortunately.
So we're talking about the 17th of December, the Monday? Is that what we're?
Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Oh, sorry.
And do we have too much stuff to combine two meetings, or is that I mean, you can see we're really only good for about 3 hours.
What we have is the
Washington Avenue, red curbing.
Washington Avenue, that's going to be,
I think that, no.
Could take some time.
yeah. For Peralta Post and traffic calming in November, it's just basically Peralta. What I found is that they're speeding 30 miles per hour, more than 30 miles per hour.
Okay.
So there is something that we can do. It's also part of the striping and signage, Peralta, and that's for the sharrows and I think bicycle lane on one direction. So that might help too. And we're also talking about some kind of reconfiguration of the Posen and Peralta intersection.
So you want to do some striping and signage at the next meeting? Or you're just saying there's a speed survey?
There's a speed survey. I actually have the speed survey. I didn't have time to actually put it in report format.
And the people from Madison Castro need to come back. And we maybe don't want to put them off for too long.
Oh yeah, the blue curve.
Yeah.
And we have the Measure D also request, the subcommittee, to form a subcommittee for the Measure D review.
You know, with that in mind, I would like to suggest that we do meet in November, even though, Reed, I'm sorry that you can't be here, but I don't really want to let that get too far away from us.
So meet in November, so.
And then
The 21st.
the 21st of November, and then I'm not sure why then we wouldn't meet again in December, just because, why wouldn't we meet every month? I mean, everybody else is meeting.
But when in December? December 19th?
Either the 19th or the 17th.
For Thursday, 19 is Thursday, so which is our day.
Right. And who could, so?
And John won't make it.
And John.
Oh, John.
I thought John could do it that day and.
No, John can do it on the 17th.
You can do the 17th, but then you can't, right?
I'm available on the 17th.
So there'll be 4 on the 17th, and there'll only be 3 on the 19th.
So then it's 17th.
So 17th.
Okay.
We might never see him.
Oh, no, I'm lost. 17th of December. Okay.
So we'll
Right.
meet November 21st and December 17th?
Yeah.
And the room is available for both those days? Great.
November 21st and December 17th.
Oh, and then, okay.
That's good. Meeting twice will give us more time to talk about the municipal code.
Well, Fareed's going to miss 2 meetings. He's going to have to work really hard on the municipal code.
I might show up for the very end of the one on the 17th, who knows?
Okay.
Got to have some accomplishments as chair, you know.
You've
My
had
pet
many.
project.
You've had many.
All right. So that will move us along to our future agenda items. And so Peralta Posen traffic calming, Washington Avenue parking on the sidewalk, Marin Curtis Safe Routes to School project initiation, December, January, Canes and Adams bicycle facility concept sometime in early 2014. We have a public comment on future agenda items.
So one of the issues that's been near and dear to Albany Strollers and Rollers is sidewalk maintenance. And the staff had an initiative, and it was part of the goals, I think, adopted by the council to do better around sidewalk maintenance. And then there was some discussion of what to do for low-income property owners around sidewalk maintenance. And so my understanding was staff was going to look at that and then bring it back. It hasn't come back. And so we'd encourage you to get an update on that. And beyond an update, while we certainly allowed staff's desire to improve the program is still intended to be structured around having property owners pay for public infrastructure, unlike road maintenance where we all pay for it through a parcel tax. So our ideal is still to have a parcel tax, and we would encourage you to, again, put that on your agenda and not let the short-term improvement sort of overwhelm the looking at that long-term goal and the feasibility of getting there. And it seems, given the passage of the road maintenance parcel tax and the storm drain maintenance parcel tax, and this parcel tax likely being quite a bit smaller than those, it's hard to imagine this not passing if it was well reasonably formulated. So please don't lose sight of that, because as we heard tonight from a woman earlier this evening, the sidewalks are definitely an issue. And so for a city that prides itself on its walkability, which that score is based only on proximity of residents to services, it's not actually based on the quality of the infrastructure. We need the quality of the infrastructure to support the inherent nature of the city otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Alan Eckert, Peralta resident, and just want to say from an informal survey, there is lots of interest in slowing those cars going down on Peralta through that three-way, especially at that Peralta-Posen intersection. So I encourage to spend lots of time, but there will be certainly lots of interest in gathering that I'll be doing and my husband will be doing on to try and get people involved with that whole project. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
So, I would like to hear what's going on with the sidewalk maintenance that was proposed.
The program that was proposed has
Yeah.
not gone to council yet. It will go maybe next month. But I'm not handling that anymore. I mean, you can ask Ray. Ray is basically the one who's handling that program.
So if we put it on our agenda, can we ask Ray to come and talk about it?
Yes.
Well, let's invite him to do that at the next or the following meeting.
Well, is there anything to add at this point until it goes to council?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Is there anything for him to add from what he's already told us? I mean, until it goes to council?
I don't think there is anything to add from what he told you. The issue is that with so many changes here, the city staff and basically crucial staff that is in the management, I think the idea is not to have, it's basically just to settle a little bit with the changes and then revisit the issue or present the issue to council when the changes, like, even with the interim manager. But at least council had a chance to actually go through the changes and then deal with the sidewalk program. I guess also there is other measures that other requests that include some kind of funding or something that the council had to really consider before you make a decision in order to make a decision for the sidewalk. So that's basically my take on that.
I guess I'd like to hear from Ray what his plans are.
Most likely, by the time that by November, the issue would be already either on its way to council or approved by council. I don't know. But as I said, I'm not involved in that program anymore.
I understand.
So I don't really know the
to
details of it.
Maybe it's appropriate to revisit in November and see if it's already gone to council, or
Right.
if it's already scheduled for council.
And I don't really know if he has done any work on the low income part of it either. So I can ask him. I can ask him tomorrow and see if what he's done or what his ideas are. But I cannot, as I said, I cannot report on that since I don't know anything.
I understand. So, is there anything else we're forgetting for the near term?
I don't think so. We have Washington, what else?
We'll probably have another report on the UC Village project.
Okay.
Maybe a report on, no, we're going to have, this is going to go on December 4, the complete street, so not for November, but for December, you'll have a report on how it went.
Right.
I have to say that I found a lot of studies on the Transportation Research Board website that we can actually download for a very minimum fee about studies on talking about the bus stop. So that may not bring in the public, but I can send to you so you can read it too. Postal location things and things like that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for staying to the end. And I will close the meeting.
That's a compliment.